shops closed, you can't buy it, and of course she couldn't really compute this, essentially, so the perhaps overreaction there. We'll be looking into that as well as a bit of a royal roundup, and looking ahead, talking to one of the postmasters as well, who has got an honour this year as well. Yeah.
What consolation that would
scandal.
be. No money, of course, just an honour, but, you know, great. I'm sure
well, better than nothing, bit of recognition for the fight that they've done, yeah.
OK, that's it from me. Thanks so much for your company. Thanks for all your kind texts and tweets. Do find me on YouTube, and I will hopefully pop up here again in the future. Peter's next, live on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here between now and 7 o'clock. Whatever you're up to this New Year's Eve, I hope you'll stay with the radio or the telly on. Remember, there are loads of ways you can watch and listen to us. If you're listening on the radio, maybe you can switch on the telly as well. We are on YouTube or your connected device. Of course, 3/4 of homes now have smart TVs. And in fact, a friend of mine, I showed him, Rooney in Portadown, I showed him in Northern Ireland, I showed him how to get us on his app on YouTube. And he now can watch us again. He'd been listening previously. You're very, very welcome to do that, or listen, of course, on your smart speaker, YouTube, or your connected device. This is, of course, Talk. There's loads to talk about today, including Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood. Some people say that's a reward for failure. Well, there are quite a few Conservatives who got gongs, perhaps for failure as well. Sir Gavin Williamson, remember, one of the worst, arguably one of the worst education secretaries this country has ever had, although a political genius as well. Tony Blair forcing mass migration. We're hearing the 20-year rule, all those different bits of information coming out. He was urged by Jack Straw, the Foreign Secretary, and John Prescott, the Deputy Prime Minister, 20 years ago, not to open the floodgates of Eastern European migrants into this country. He said it would be fine. Guess what? It wasn't. And one person who's reflected on that and many other things is Nigel Farage. He has a New Year's message that's out today. We can probably expect New Year messages from Kemi Badenoch and indeed the Prime Minister Keir Starmer coming tomorrow. We'll talk about all of that. We'll also talk about Israel, because there's a really interesting piece of journalism from Gaza, a Times journalist who's actually spoken to people in Gaza about what they think of Hamas, and we sort of naively assume that everybody in Gaza supports Hamas. That's just not the case, and they often think that Hamas doesn't represent them, and also that there are, guess what, a lot of useful idiots on the left in this country and others who think they know what they're talking about but actually aren't and are weaponising that. So we'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about Wayne Rooney as well. He has been axed as the manager of the club which he has been manager of, which is of course Plymouth Argyle. And we will be talking about a video in Northern Ireland as well. This is just before Christmas. An autistic woman, Katie is her name, and she has the mindset of a toddler. She went to buy a £2 DVD but was carried out of the shop by police officers when the incident escalated. We'll be looking at that, and we'll be talking to a former senior police officer and getting a reaction from MENCAP as well. We'll read out their statement. There's a lot to talk about, and we're talking to Sharron Davies as well, the former Olympian, about why so few Olympians have actually got honours in this round of New Year's honours. Let us know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Shalape is on the phones today. If you've never done it before, you give her a ring, you make your point, and we'll get you on between now and 1 if we can. 0344 499 1000, that's the main number. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note on that number via WhatsApp. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss. Let's get started here on Talk. Lots to discuss today, and Sadiq Khan getting a knighthood is the first thing we're going to discuss with the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Ryan Saby, who is with me. Ryan, there might be some people who say that he is, third term or as Mayor of London. He is the most senior Muslim politician in this country, but also violent crime has soared 30% from 190,000 incidents in 2016 when he first came to power to 250,000 incidents in the past year. What's your take on this, Ryan?
Well, I think when it comes to knighthoods, I think it depends on which side of the political divide you are on. I think people can find fault in absolutely any honour. I mean, I was listening to a radio phone-in last night, and people are angry at the fact that Gareth Southgate got a knighthood, and he took the England team to a couple of finals. But I think when it comes to Sadiq Khan, I think there is particular anger from the Tory side of things, particularly because they talk about every single target that he set himself or was set, whether it comes to housing or crime or knife crime. He seemed to miss it. And we hear this phrase being used, rewards for failure. And from that side of the political fence, it seems like there's absolute anger. And also, don't forget the ULEZ row that was brought in a couple of years ago. We had the expansion back in August last year, and I think people are still very, very angry about that. So I think it depends on where you sit on the political divide. And as you mentioned, Gavin Williamson obviously splits opinion. So I think you pay your money, you take your choice on these. There's
no real rhyme or reason, is there, Ryan, to honours? And some, Gareth Southgate, some would say he served his country very, very well. He's brought the England football team to a much greater glory than they had, certainly for some years. Maybe he should get a knighthood. There are almost no honours that come out there that people say, actually, 100% that person should get that honour. Even last year when Alan Bates became Sir Alan Bates, for example, the man behind the post office, exposing the scandal and representing those people, and we see four more of those people. We hope to speak to one of them later on, actually, who has received an honour. Well, actually, some people will say, well, they should be given greater honours, or maybe the honour isn't enough. Maybe this is actually something that is given to them because it's sort of a consolation prize for some of the compensation that hasn't come to them so far for a scandal that shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Yeah, no, I think the trouble is when you give these honours to sitting politicians, I think that makes it even worse in a way, because they are still there, they are still serving, they're literally to be got at. And even when there was talk at the beginning of December that Sadiq Khan was very, very likely to get a knighthood, and a petition was set up by a Conservative councillor, I should add, and that has already got, at the beginning of December, 200,000 signatures.
Yeah, we've spoken to him in this programme a number of times, Matthew Goodwin-Freeman as well. Yes, he's contributed to this programme, and certainly there are a lot of people who feel very, very strongly about it, not least Neil, who has been in touch, he says, from Labour-obliterated Wales, as he puts it. So Khan and Southgate get knighted, typical Starmer, rewarding people for mediocrity and failure. Sums Labour up in a full race to the bottom, in Neil's opinion. And Mark on the Isle of Wight says, is it because the left want to ban horse racing that no one from that sport was on the honours list this year? I'm not familiar with the entire honours list, Mark, but certainly I think what that illustrates is that there are many people who have opinions on this and always will. Ryan, I wonder if I could take you to another part of the news, and this is the fact that we're expecting probably tomorrow that there will be New Year's messages from Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer. We don't know what's in them just yet, but what we do know is that Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, has put out a message actually from the birthplace of Winston Churchill, Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, and we can just have a little look at what he has been saying now.
I want to say this to you. If you agree with what we're trying to do, don't just sit back and nod. Do something about it. Join those 150,000 people who've already joined our party, because I promise you this, the only way we win, the only way we mend broken Britain, the only way we get reform in our country that so badly needs it, is if you, who agree with us, join our people's army.
And Nigel Farage talking about the fact that 150,000 people have joined Reform UK. It now has a larger membership than the Conservative Party. I just want to play one more clip about what he has been saying in his New Year's message and then get Ryan Sabi's reaction.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people, and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
Well, that's Nigel Farage there. He had a much longer message, about 6 minutes or so. I'm sure you can find that online if you want to see the whole thing. But Ryan, what is your reaction to what Nigel Farage is saying, putting it out on New Year's Eve, perhaps understanding, as I think Reform UK have over the past few days, that actually the time between Christmas and New Year is actually a good time to get stories out and to get your message heard right across the country?
Yeah, it can be a very, very fruitful time for certain parties. And I think particularly if you are on the rise like Reform is. And I think the one thing that Nigel Farage has done very well there, he's got a fantastic setting. He's gone to Blenheim Palace. He almost makes himself look statesman-like. And I think one thing that Nigel Farage is doing that the Conservatives aren't doing is kind of filling that void. Kemi Badenoch, it seems like she doesn't want to have any concrete policies, or she doesn't want them for a fair while. She says that she's a scientist, an engineer, and she will take her time in coming up with policies. Well, if she's going to take her time, there's one person who's going to fill that gap, and that's Nigel Farage.
And it's really interesting, Ryan. It's really interesting. I mean, the headline there's a very good website called Conservative Home, which I know you read, as do really lots of politicos. And its main story today, after, basically about 10 weeks, or not even 10 weeks of Kemi Badenoch, is how long has Kemi Badenoch got before she really has to make a big impression and can stop the doubters? Given that that's been said already, given that Keir Starmer has only been there for, roughly 6 months or so, and he is, people are doubting his leadership and there are whispers about his leadership and so on, is this just part of politics? Is this just what happens, do you think, Ryan? Or actually is there a bigger problem first for Kemi Badenoch and then for Keir Starmer?
I think it's a bigger problem for Kemi Badenoch, because I think the peel off of voters to reform mainly comes from the Conservatives. So I think Kemi does have a real issue, and she has to fill that void, and she has to do it very, very. I think one thing to mention is one real test will be at those local elections in May. Now, it's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months away, but if she doesn't do particularly well then, and then Reform do particularly well, not only in England, but also do particularly well in Wales, they have the momentum. And what we call in politics the big mo, that is with the Reform Party. So I think Kemi Badenoch, I don't think she should be looking over her shoulder just yet, but I think things could get very sort of hot under the collar if the Conservatives look like they're going to lose a lot of council seats and councils themselves. And I think going into this election this year, I think the Conservatives come from a particularly high point from 4 years ago when the Conservatives were doing very well after the vaccine rollout and the COVID, what was going on at that time. So Kemi just has to watch her back slightly and just make sure that she does give enough red meat or enough policy to her members and supporters to keep them happy.
Ryan, we'll come back to you after the break, and thank you for your contribution so far. I just want to speak to David in London now, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. There are a few other political stories we want to go through, including Tony Blair and mass migration and what's come out of the National Archives. But David, as a Londoner, I know you have some thoughts on Sadiq Khan. What would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme this New Year's Eve.
Hi, Peter. Thank you. Peter, I think a lot of Sadiq Khan, he's gotten away with a lot of his policies because his policies are very new. But as ...100%, I can promise you that. And you can't. A city can't function without roads. It's all very well saying, "Oh, we don't want cars." Well, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't want to be too London-focused, David, and of course we always remember that 82% of our viewers and listeners live outside London, and we can't be too London-focused, but yeah. it is the capital city of this country, and really I, as someone who lives in London, would like him to sort out pollution on the tube, if that's a thing, because there are lots of people coughing and spluttering on there. David, what is the one thing Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq Khan, should do now, do you think, to bring people like you round? What could convince you that actually his knighthood is justified and that he's a good mayor of London?
I don't think Sadiq Khan listens, and Peter, it's got to be said, yes, I'm talking about London, but this is what he's doing is being repeated.
You're right.
The country,
You're absolutely right.
I wouldn't waste my time trying to communicate with Sadiq Khan. He doesn't listen anyway. He knows exactly what the problems are. He can see on CCTV. Look at Park Lane, businesses stuck in traffic there. That's what he wants.
And things like violent crime as well, soaring 30% from 190,000 incidents in 2016 when he first came to power to 250,000 this year. And David is absolutely right. These things like the ultra-low emission zones, they're being repeated right throughout the country. There are similar things in low-traffic neighbourhoods in Birmingham, in Bristol, in Glasgow, in lots of different places, and I'm sure there are lots of councils as well thinking, hold on, this is a bit of a money spinner. Thank you to Stuart as well, who sent me a message to say, wasn't the salary of £5 million a year enough for Gareth Southgate? I think that's a fair point, actually, but then again, if they offer him a knighthood, is he going to say no? And there is a question, and if you want to engage with this question, you're very welcome to do so, 0344 499 1000, on the honours aspect of this, where should people be given honours for essentially doing their job? Kerry Mulligan, for example, very good actress, but she's been given a job for, she's been given, I should say, a CBE for services to drama. Well, she's made a lot of money being an actress, and that's her job. You know, Sir Mick Jagger, for example, made millions being the Rolling Stone that he is. But at the same time, is he someone who should be receiving that kind of recognition? Or maybe these people are ambassadors for our country, and that's something you're happy with. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Use the break to give me a call. We'll talk more to Ryan Saby in a second about Tony Blair and what he did 20 years ago and the effects that we're feeling every single day now. And we'll get Ryan's political predictions for 2025. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger or, you know, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Some breaking news, I'm just getting it on my phone here, and that is that Johnny Walker, the former BBC Radio 2 DJ, has died at the age of 79. He died today, 2 months after calling time on his 58-year career because of ill health. A veteran DJ, very, very well known, did Sounds of the 70s and many, many other programmes. That's Johnny Walker, the Radio 2 DJ, who has died at the age of 79. And the DJ Bob Harris, who took over the BBC Radio 2 Sounds of the 70s show after Walker's retirement, announced his former colleague's death live on the station today. Johnny Walker had pulmonary fibrosis, scarring of the lungs, a condition which makes breathing difficult, and he stepped down from presenting Sounds of the 70s and The Rock Show on Radio 2 at the end of October. The head of Radio 2, Helen Thomas, said, "Everyone is heartbroken about the passing of Johnny, a much-loved broadcasting legend. He made Sounds of the 70s and The Rock Show appointments to listen to, sharing his personal memories and tales each week. He loved radio and inspired a generation of presenters, passionately promoting the artists and music he cared about most deeply. His wry sense of humour and his warm, open style of presenting ensured he was adored by his audience. The airwaves simply won't be the same again. It will be much missed by us, by staff and presenters and listeners alike, and our thoughts are with his wife and his children. So that is Johnny Walker, who has died at the age of 79, the former BBC Radio 2 DJ, much loved and very, very well known. Of course, he only stood down after 58 years on the airwaves a couple of months ago. Let's go back to Ryan Saby now. He is Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. And Ryan, around this time of year as well, we always get lots of different bits of information about what had happened previously. The 30-year rule about things 30 years ago, now the 20-year rule. And we're getting stuff that Tony Blair did or didn't do. Just talk us through this story in regard to mass migration and some warnings that were sounded and not heeded, but certainly sounded, and later apparently turned out to be true from people like Jack Straw, the former Foreign Secretary, and indeed the late Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott.
Yeah, a very interesting story that's been dug up by through the National Archives, and with that 20-year rule, it's been made public. But I take you back to 2004, and there were 8 countries, mainly ex-Soviet countries, who were being admitted to the European Union at that time. And Tony Blair decided himself that the people and workers from this country from those countries would be able to come over here. Now, one thing that at that time Tony Blair was getting warnings from was the likes of the Foreign Secretary at the time, Jack Straw, and the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, to actually impose some controls, because it seemed from the outset that there was just going to be totally unrestricted access for people from those countries into the European Union under freedom of movement. And that is why we've had reaction today from the likes of Richard Tice from the Reform Party, or Robert Jenrick, I know, that has spoken about this, just saying that Tony Blair almost was that architect of mass migration. And maybe if Tony Blair had listened to the likes of Jack Straw or John Prescott at the time, things may have been different. Now, one thing I'll take you back to as well, Peter, if you remember during those Brexit negotiations, David Cameron was, at one point, there was much talk of an emergency brake being applied to migration and big numbers coming into this country. Now, that idea was dismissed, but you do wonder whether an idea such as an emergency brake could have been applied at that point, whether we'd have seen successive governments getting into such problems when it comes to mass migration.
Well, you're right, and there are some, like Angela Merkel, for example, who may well have been ruining the day they didn't actually give concessions to David Cameron when he tried to renegotiate his relationship with the EU. But certainly mass migration was one of the major parts of Brexit, and I wonder whether Tony Blair will, historically anyway, be held responsible for the circumstances, or at least some of the circumstances that led to Brexit. Some people will, of course, do that already, but I wonder whether his legacy will be looked at slightly differently as a result of knowing this, or perhaps it's just a bit more information that is useful to historians.
Yeah, I think it's useful to historians on one level, but I think Tony Blair, I think when the sort of focus of Brexit, and when people look back at this in 20 or 30 years' time, it's not only Tony Blair who didn't really get a grip with it, but it was successive governments, whether it's Labour or Conservative, who didn't really grasp the issue. And in the years following that Tony Blair decision, net migration went up to 200,000 people per year. Now, look at the politicians now. They would die for the fact that net migration is be at 200,000, or certainly those who want to control it and bring down those numbers. We had those figures out just the other week that showed that net migration was at 900,000 in the year to June. There's just big numbers. And obviously that's where politicians like Reform or Nigel Farage can fill that void and just ask the question about what have these politicians of all colours been doing for the last 20 years in trying to actually get a grip of the issue.
Ryan, just briefly, what do you think or is going to happen, or that we know is going to happen in 2025? We know there will be elections, although there are questions over some of those local elections. What do you think we can see? What are the challenges ahead in regard to what Kemi Badenoch, Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, all the big political figures are going to be thinking about and we know is going to happen? Big spending review coming, of course, that's going to be a 6-month process. Lots to consider there. But what are your predictions, I suppose, around what we know already?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very tough year for Sir Keir Starmer. I think I think it will just get tougher because some of the measures that he brought in the budget, whether it's the national insurance rise, that won't kick in until April. So we'll see the full effects of that. He's going to have issues over the defence review and getting spending and that roadmap up to 2.5%. He's been under big pressure to get it to that amount. So I think and also for Keir Starmer, he's put as his main priority growth, for his government. And it looks like growth is going to be particularly poor, not only for next year, but in the successive sort of 3 or 4 years. Hence, I think Kemi Badenoch needs to get her act together pretty quickly, and she needs to come up with some big policies. And the person who's just going to sort of come out as the winner out of all of this is Nigel Farage, as the government and the economy seems to sort of flatline a little bit. Nigel Farage can come in and steal their clothes. And I think with Kemi Badenoch, the same, really. I think she's got big problems, more so when it comes to Nigel Farage.
Yeah, we will see where all of that goes. Thank you, Ryan. Very happy New Year to you. That's Ryan Saby there, who is the Deputy Political Editor of The Sun. Thanks to Tad Davison in Cambridge. He says, Peter, were I offered an award for which I was not entitled or had done very little to earn it, I would turn it down. Those are my own personal standards and are not negotiable. That's why I frown upon those like Sadiq Khan and Gareth Southgate. They diminish the honour system and bring it into disrepute. Well, thank you, Tad, for your thoughts on that. Keep them coming in. 87222 is the number for text, and you can send me a voice note. I'm not sure we've had a voice note so far today. 0344 499 1000. We'll play some of those out between now and 7 o'clock. I idiotically said I was here until 1 o'clock. I'm certainly not here until 1 o'clock. I'm here until 7 o'clock this evening, and then James Max is here between 7 and 10, and Petri Hoskin will ring in 2025 with you between 10 and 1. So she's here till 1, not me. But listen, thank you to everybody who's been in touch so far. After the break, we're going to speak to the Times journalist Venetia Menzies. This is really, really interesting because we hear so much about Gaza and the Middle East and in this country, and anti-Semitism in this country as well, and pro-Palestinian marches and so on. Well, what do the people of Gaza actually think? Because we hear Hamas propaganda, but what do the people on the ground, especially those who don't like Hamas, what are they actually saying? Well, Venetia has done some actual journalism and found out, and then she's going to tell us her finding. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, there's a journalist for the Times called Venetia Menzies we're going to talk to now, and she wrote an absolutely fascinating article a couple of days ago that I thought it was really important to talk about. And this is, she interviewed people in Gaza or people who've recently left Gaza because of how Hamas are dealing with them there. And I suppose we naively assume that the people in Gaza necessarily support Hamas terrorists who are wreaking destruction, who created the 7th of October terrorist atrocities, who are holding hostages, about 100 hostages, about 100 Israeli hostages. And of course, there's no great love for Israel, not that I would expect there to be in Gaza, but there's no great love for Hamas either. So let's talk to Venetia now. Venetia, great article, really, probably one of the best articles I've actually read this year. And it told me something I didn't already know and could not have predicted. So, I mean, I just want to read out a couple of bits of it and then want to ask you about it, if that's all right. This is someone you spoke to, and of course the names have been changed for obvious reasons. 7th of October, a turning point. They made a huge mistake. They did not calculate the consequences. Food was distributed to their members while civilians were starving. I saw this with my own eyes, said someone you spoke to. They built tunnels to save their members while civilians were left above the ground to face death. There's also another quotation here. It was proven on the 7th of October that Hamas does not have the interests of the Palestinian people as its northern star, according to Wassim, a writer and translator in his late 30s from Gaza, who is now in South Africa. They're dragging us towards more death and destruction. They have cheapened the value of the Palestinian people. Venetia, really, really interesting to hear this. How would you sort of calculate and almost evaluate the level of support for Hamas terrorists within Gaza, and tell us just a little bit about how you did the physical process of the journalism here and tracking some of these people down and persuading them to speak to you?
Well, thanks, Peter, for having me on and for the kind words. It's incredibly difficult to get an understanding of the scale of opposition to Hamas in Gaza. Firstly, we can see how unreliable polling has been across the whole world this year, let alone when you're trying to poll people who are suffering the everyday consequences of war and are also living in a country where Hamas have a stranglehold over their freedom of expression. So there have been attempts by different survey groups to poll people who are in Gaza, trying to estimate the level of support for Hamas. One of those groups estimated it at around a third in September, and another poll found it at only 7%. But I think it's really hard to get any reliable data on how people feel. So I went for the more anecdotal approach, which was to try and speak to as many people as I could who were willing to be honest about how they feel about Hamas and felt safe enough to do so. And
you must have encountered a lot of people who just wouldn't speak to you.
Absolutely. Throughout the year reporting on this war, I've spoken to many Gazans who don't feel comfortable talking about it for their own safety, for the safety of their families. But the people I spoke to, they were willing to take that risk because they're very frustrated that their opinions are being crowded out by others, and they're frustrated that the world seems to think that Gazans all support Hamas, that there's not a diversity of opinion, where of course there is, as there is in every country. And even the day after I had a telephone call with a few of these Gazans, they received threatening messages from the Hamas's electronic crimes unit, telling them that they essentially should moderate their comments or expect to be visited by Hamas. So there are real serious threats.
And that's not a visit for a cup of tea. I mean, that is a very serious threat. There's another aspect of this that I really want to get into that you illustrate very well, and that's someone called Blair who told you that we noticed that Islamist and leftist communities outside of Gaza hate to see Gazan civilians speak. They prefer to use the voices of Gazan people for their own agenda. To them, the blood of people in Gaza is nothing but a sacrifice to please their gods, to please their own ego, to please the void of their incapacity to change their own lives and their countries. To them, Gaza is nothing but a reality TV show where they get to support one team. They get to make T-shirts. They get to make buttons, even songs for them to dance to. The complaint was always how Israel dehumanizes us, but guess what? We're also being dehumanized praised by those who claim to support us. I mean, that is fascinating, especially in the context here in the UK of how many groups, both Islamist and leftist and other groups as well, say they are pro-Palestine, say they support the Gazan people, but actually that sentiment is perhaps more nuanced and more complicated than those people might think it is.
Absolutely. And I think that nuance is the key theme in this report. And I'm sure that many pro-Palestinian demonstrators have nuanced views, and I won't paint them all with the same brush. But the people I spoke to were very frustrated by those who either glorify martyrdom, glorified Hamas in their protests, or who had anti-Semitic signs. They consider them not to be good custodians of their message and not to be actually prioritizing the views of the Palestinian people by glorifying martyrdom. They said that their narrative is that we must die, whereas our narrative is that we must live.
And that's fascinating as well in regard to a lot of the controversies that are there at the moment, not least today. We've had the head of the World Health Organization saying that hospitals in Gaza, in his view, have become battlegrounds. The health system is under severe threat. We've seen quite a number of hospitals being targeted by Israel. What we've also seen is the fact that there have been hospitals, schools at various points throughout the last number of months since this war began that have been used as Hamas terrorist headquarters as well, or bases for them. I mean, we talk about the fog of war here as well. It is absolutely clear there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. People are suffering, innocent people are suffering. I'm not in any way minimizing that. What I also want to kind of get out, and I wonder what your perspective is, Venetia, is the fact that this contrast between we must die versus we must live. Hamas's view is this will be a propaganda victory if more people die. That's how it seems to me, and that is, it seems, a weapon of war as well.
Yeah, I think the people I spoke to would agree with that. It's very hard to know as we don't have information on the ground. Israel has restricted the international press from being there, and we don't have eyes on the evidence that the IDF has offered as to the fact that there are Hamas command and control centers in the hospitals. So it's very hard to make a clear comment on it. But regardless, it's clear that there must be humanitarian protections, there must be medical care for those in Gaza, whether or not Hamas is using these places, these protected places which have special status, to operate with impunity. It's a very difficult matter, and there's a lot of concern over the whereabouts of the current director of Kamal Adwan, and it's believed he's been taken to Sadiq Khan prison in Israel. And, you know, that's the same prison where months ago there was CCTV footage which emerged showing prison guards torturing and sodomizing detainees, and multiple Israeli human rights organizations have accused the prison of breaching human rights. So it's a very complicated picture, and it's very difficult for all those who don't have access to medical care in Gaza right now.
You mentioned the fact that journalists aren't, and international journalists aren't allowed inside Gaza, and that is a restriction that Israel has brought in, and I think that's a mistake. What I also think is interesting is the fact that there are lots of people who either are or call themselves Palestinian journalists. We know recently that 5 of them lost their lives in an Israeli airstrike, and Israel said they're actually Hamas activists. There are many Palestinian journalists, I think we've got to use the term pretty loosely, in that many of them are clearly Hamas propagandists. But I wonder how you, as a journalist reporting that area, actually deal with and, I mean, take the word of, I suppose, the news gathering such as it is, such as it can happen in that war theatre of journalists or people who call themselves journalists on the ground. How do you evaluate that?
I think it's very hard to evaluate both the statements made by those who are operating under the restrictions of Hamas's control on freedom of expression, as well as it is the IDF statements, which are often not backed up with evidence that they will share. So it's very hard to know. And obviously there's been hundreds of journalists killed in Gaza, not just those 5. And I'm sure that many of them were journalists working in unimaginable conditions who have died. So it's very hard to say without any evidence as to who these people are, if they are really Hamas operatives.
Yeah, certainly. Venetia, absolutely fascinating to speak to you, and I think what you've done is shed some light, and keep doing it, by the way, keep going, on things that you know, we hear so much propaganda, we hear so much stuff that just isn't evidence-based, and you've done some actual old-fashioned journalism, so well done, keep it up, and no doubt we'll talk again at some stage in the future, I hope. That is Venetia Venetia Menzies, who's a journalist for The Times, so thank you to her. In a moment, we're going to talk to Sharron Davies, the former Olympian, because there are people talking about this honours row here in the UK, wondering, oh, hold on a second, what about all these people who won medals in the rowing teams, for example, in the Olympics? Where are their MBEs, OBEs, etc.? We'll get more into that with Sharron Davies, former Olympian herself, in just a minute here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger or, you know, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Cliff in Berkshire, who says, Peter, I used to listen to Johnny Walker on Pirate Radio and enjoyed his shows. I must admit I thought he was older than 79. A sad loss, says Cliff. Yeah, that is the breaking news that Johnny Walker, the very famous DJ, has very sadly died at the age of 79. I'm not surprised you thought he was older. He was on the radio for 58 years. Certainly a long and amazing career. Stacey in Wallington says, I would like to wish everybody at Talk a very happy new year. Thank you, Stacey. Please give a shout out to Christine Lindsay, MBE. She started the Gary Mason charity when he passed away in 2011. Christine also runs a lot of other charities for the London Borough of Sutton, and Christine, along with the Gary Mason charity, organised the borough's entry every year into the New Year's Day parade in London. Christine, well deserved for MBE for all her amazing charity work. Listen, we're very, very happy to say that, and Christine certainly sounds as if she is someone who absolutely deserves her honour. There's some perhaps who many think, including someone, Mr. Desai, who are not entirely sure the New Year's honours are deserved by everybody. Let's hear what Mr. Desai has to say.
There is a lady called Ushma Patel. Her job is to keep Prime Minister's diary, and she gets OBE. This country has gone completely nuts.
Well, there was actually the hairdresser to Boris Johnson, which is perhaps a job that does deserve an honour, given how impossible it is, who got an honour as well, although that was done in a slightly different way. That was done in Prime Minister's honours. They have them in their resignation honours, and in fact there are going to be more honours coming down the track, because Rishi Sunak's resignation honours will probably come out in the next month or two. We will see what happens there. I want to talk now about honours for the victorious Olympic men's 8 crew, because the climbing champion Toby Roberts and the shooting gold medalist Nathan Hales have missed out on honours in the New Year's list after a change in policy. Well, Sharron Davies is a former Olympian herself. Sharron, it used to be, or seems to be, that there was a long-held practice of Britain's Olympic champions automatically receiving at least MBEs, but this seems to have been ditched in a move that has raised quite a lot of eyebrows, including yours. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a tough thing, isn't it, to become an Olympic champion? And most Olympians only get one opportunity. Some are lucky enough maybe to cover 2 Olympics. And now, because of lottery, which is all down to the Great British public, we are supporting our athletes a lot better, which means that they can be full-time athletes. I mean, lottery does not mean that they're making a lot of money. It really doesn't. It means they can just about pay, you know, some rent or a mortgage maybe.
And people make huge sacrifices. You know far more than I do.
Exactly.
I mean, I know a guy called Andy Bell, his daughter Georgia Bell, great hero bronze medalist in Paris this year. And I mean, the sacrifices that they have made over the years. I know Andy a bit, he's a political journalist. The sacrifices they have made over the years, the times standing at the side of cold, you know, track meets and all the rest of it. And the financial sacrifices they make as well. If you achieve a medal in the Olympics, to me, it should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it always was an Olympic gold. And I kind of think maybe, you know, that's a good kind of precedence to set. You know, Olympic gold is pretty impressive. I'm not sure that it should be every single medal, because now we're winning so many. You know, when I won my medal way back in 1980, a long time ago, I was the only female medalist of any colour in an individual event whatsoever. And now we regularly win 65, 67 medals, you know. So I think that lottery has made an absolutely huge difference. And 2012, we built facilities as well. We built more 50-metre pools in the 3 years leading up to 2012 than we built in the previous 30 years in this country. We'd really got left behind. So that has made a very big difference. And we should be very proud of our athletes. You know, they're incredibly successful for such a small nation.
Are we a victim of our own success? Are there just too many excellent athletes?
Well, maybe. You know, maybe that's the thing, isn't it? You can't hand out these awards to absolutely everybody. And if so many people are winning medals, then it's much more difficult to do. I think where I have an issue is when people are being rewarded for doing their jobs. I mean, someone like Sadiq Khan, who hasn't really even improved London, is on £160,000. You know, he paid a nighttime czar £130,000 a year to improve the nightlife, and it went down 17%.
And she wasn't there for a lot of it as well.
Exactly. To pay people who actually don't improve something when they're actually on a salary, I find quite extraordinary, to be honest with you. I think these awards should be going to people that are doing what they're doing because of the passion of wanting to be great and to stand up for their countries. And people like the lady that you mentioned earlier that are doing hours and hours and hours of charity work for absolutely nothing. These are the people we should be recognising.
It's going to be a big year in women's sport in 2025 as well. Sharron, I wonder what your predictions are, what you think will happen, and what we can look forward to.
Yeah, for me, obviously, I've been very much fighting the battle for women's sport now since 2015, you know, and I think with Trump coming in very soon in January, he is going to protect what we call Title IX, which is female athletes getting equal opportunities. Now, they get nowhere near equal opportunities to men. Women get 4% of the sponsorship dollar in sport. Men get 96% of all the money that's floating around in the world of professional or sport in general, advertising, TV coverage, contracts, etc., prize money. And, you know, women now aren't even allowed to have their own competitions free from men. So I've been fighting that battle since 2015. And I'd like to think that 2025, we can eventually win it. You know, surprising it would be that Trump will be the person that will actually do that for us. And also,
what do you think that says, Sharron? What do you think that says, that it takes the fact that Donald Trump is the president to actually change that? And we have had some victories for the things you advocate for in recent weeks. As many people would say that banning puberty blockers, for example, is not a bad idea, actually a very good idea. But I wonder, Sharron, what you think it says when this kind of common sense approach that you advocate, that have fearlessly advocated, that have taken huge amounts of criticism for advocating, is now hopefully going forward. Have we reached a tipping point here in this debate, do you think?
I hope so. I mean, the CAS report has made a huge difference in the UK, and that is obviously spread out across the world. I mean, puberty is not an illness. You know, and we've been treating it like an illness. It's just a natural process. And kids that, 12, 13, 14, I mean, when I do motivation talks, and I always say, at 18, I thought I knew everything. And at 28, I realised I didn't. And at 30, I realised I knew nothing. You know, that is the situation, isn't it? All 18-year-olds think they know everything. And they're making absolutely massive decisions, which will, in some instances, ruin their qualities of life, make them sterile, mean they won't be able to have children, and they could change their mind in a few years' time. So we need to allow kids to go through puberty. And an awful lot of these children are children that come from difficult backgrounds. Many of them are autistic. The statistics for autistic children is off the scale that think they're trans. Then it's women and young girls that have been abused. Then it's homophobic. We're basically transing away gay kids. So if we can just support these children throughout puberty, and then, as adults, if they choose to make those life-changing decisions, then absolutely. But as children, we cannot treat puberty as an illness. It really isn't. So that's been a great move.
And in women's sport itself, you think things are going to change? You think in women's sport that this common sense approach hopefully will be taken more in 2025?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there was no common sense in the boxing, was there, whatsoever in Paris. I mean, that was just an extraordinary state of affairs where we had two males that had, failed sex tests that were allowed to box, to thump women,
yes,
in a boxing ring. I mean, that was insane. It really was insane. And so this has got to stop. And if the only way we can do that is to bring back sex screening, which when the athletes were asked at the end of 2000s, 87% said, yes, please, we want you to carry on. And the IOC still stopped it. So the female athletes do want this, and many of them are just scared to speak out. I mean, I get phone calls from coaches and athletes and parents every single day that are absolutely distraught, and particularly in combat sports and things like football, where their careers are going to be ruined if they're made to compete against male athletes that are so much stronger and so much quicker. For punching, for example, a male will punch 160% harder than a female. And that's less dense bone structure. So, it's a massive accident waiting to happen, and we shouldn't have to have a death of a female athlete before we do what is just basic common sense.
You're absolutely right, and common sense is the key point in all of that. Sharron, I just want to read out a message from Ben in Plymouth just before you go. Sharron Davies is an absolute legend, great swimmer. She's amazingly graceful, stands up for what's right, and she's from Devon, says Ben in Plymouth. So there we are. Listen.
Very proud Plymothian. Here in Bath now, which is beautiful, but very proud Plymothian.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Sharron, and a very happy New Year to you. Andrew is in South Wales and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Sharron Davies. She's been a hero of mine for some time, for sticking up for women's sports. Just a quick background, I've coached women and men in football and rugby for 10 years. And like Sharron says, the difference is astronomical. Like, I've seen a girl get her two front incisors on the right side knocked out by a male. Completely accidental. The guy passed the ball. They both kept on running, and it was like she hit the concrete wall. It's totally... The difference is so crazy, and like, we can argue about politics and whatever and stuff, but it's the one argument where someone kind of says, I think there's nothing wrong with it.
And Andrew, to me, the debate in sport and elsewhere is really straightforward. It's not about demonising people who are trans. No. It's not about being horrible to people. It's simply dealing with facts and saying that there are men and there are women, And actually, when it comes to sport, for example, you need to have a level playing field. You need to make sure that, as you know, as someone who's coached people, that there are very, very different levels of physicality, of fitness, of strength, of bone structure. Exactly what Sharron was just saying there a moment ago.
Yeah, and like reaction times, like when the ball is 50-50, the guys are just on it so much quicker than the women. And I stuck up for women on, social media, and I've been labelled a misogynist and all this. And it's like, well, look, if I took on a chimpanzee my size, it would probably rip my arms off. This is not, it's not, me trying to be superior or anything. It's just that I feel really worried that until this changes, someone's daughter is going to get really seriously hurt.
Yeah.
And I think Sharron has just been magnificent. I'm surprised that she wasn't on the honours list, because she has really pushed this Olympics. And even though she says about the boxers, and it broke my heart to see Gina Carano getting beaten to a pulp by the male Algerian boxer. But anyway, the good thing is that I don't think this will happen again after the work.
Well, let's hope not, Andrew. And listen, you make some really, really good points there, and thank you for that, Andrew, in South Wales there, and a very happy New Year to you. Still to come, we're going to talk to Matthew Laza, the former Labour advisor, and Charlie Rowley, who was a Conservative advisor. They're going to be with us here in the studio because Keir Starmer, under growing pressure to tackle the small boats crisis, the number of migrants crossing the Channel, 3 times more than last December. Here we are on the final day of December, final day of the year, and we can see that crisis. Sir Sadiq Khan as well. Plenty of people want to make their points on that, and we will certainly let you do that between now and 7. You can get your call in during the break. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This
Well, Well, a very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this evening. Lots to talk about. Sir Sadiq Khan and the honours list. We'll be getting the views of Charlie Rooney and Matthew Laza live in the studio. Commentators, both former advisors to Labour and Conservative respectively. Both, we will talk to them. We'll also talk about Tony Blair and mass migration, the small boats crisis. Lots to talk about, as well as Gareth Southgate getting his gong as well. A little bit later on in the programme, I want to talk about the fact that there was a autistic and basically non-verbal woman who was carried out of a store in Northern Ireland as well. That's been a big issue, and lots of people thinking that was handled pretty badly. We'll get your reaction to all of these things. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. There are three things you can do with the main number 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note. We've had some of those already this evening. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or just give me a ring. That is the thing I like doing most. I like talking to our viewers and listeners. Give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Loads to talk about this evening here on Talk. Well, Matthew Laza and Charlie Rooney are here. Hello.
Good.
How are you doing?
Good evening.
Nice to see you. Happy New Year for in the next 7 hours time. For you, Matthew is a former Labour advisor. Charlie is a former Conservative advisor. Let's get down to brass tacks here, because the New Year's honours are out. The ones that are controversial are Gareth Southgate and, mainly politically anyway, Sir Sadiq Khan. Charlie, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm all for Gareth Southgate getting a knighthood. I think we've never had so much success under an England manager for such a long period of time.
Well, we have in 1966.
Well, for a long period of time.
Even I know that.
For a long period of time. But I thought he did very well. I mean, the last competition, we kind of got quite lucky, I think, through the rounds. But, we got to the finals nonetheless, I think. And
because you are a football fan, aren't you, Charlie?
I am.
Yeah, genuine football fan.
I am. I'm a season ticket holder at Arsenal.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm not.
You're not.
No.
You're not. What, at Arsenal or just
no?
Football,
just genuinely. I'm with you, Peter.
Football in general.
But I don't object to Sir Gareth. I think
know your limits. That's my thoughts on sport. Although we will be talking about sport a little bit later in the hour as well. But Matthew, presumably you have an opinion on Sir Sadiq Khan.
Well, I mean, look, I can understand why some people, are getting angry about this. Sadiq, it has been elected now 3 times as Mayor of London. If you're going to dish out political honours, which is the tradition in this country, and we've got a batch of Tories as well, I think what particularly the Prime Minister has tried to do here is he's given one to Sadiq and he's given one to Andy Street, who lost as the Mayor of the West Midlands but was elected twice. He's trying to show how important we should regard the mayoralities around the country, and that they're not, and that they are really, they're obviously a relatively new invention.
Why has Andy Burnham not got one then?
Well, I'm sure maybe he will when he's re-elected 3 times.
He and Starmer aren't exactly close, are they?
Well, I'm not sure how close Sadiq and Starmer are. I mean, we saw the dispute between Starmer and the U-list. I personally think giving them to any sort of serving politicians who are on a senior rank is a bit over the top. So say if somebody is sort of chairing a select committee but they're clearly towards the end of their career, then I think that's one thing. So I personally, might have held off, but it doesn't anger me, because all the anger that people have about Sadiq is he's got the largest direct electoral mandate in Europe and he's won 3 times.
He has won 3 times. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But he's also not been massively successful in a number of ways. Sir Sadiq has seen a knife crime increasing by more than 50%. Violent crime is up 30% from 190,000 incidents in 2016 to 250,000 this year. The capital's roads are the most congested in Europe. The average delay on a major A road and motorways across Greater London has gone up by a quarter since 2021. He appointed Amy Lamé, who was pretty lame, as a night czar. She was paid £130,000 a year for a job that she wasn't at very many times, and the number of pubs, bars and clubs holding a 24-hour alcohol licence in the capital has fallen by 2/3 in 2 years. Londoners have also seen a 71% surge in charges under the so-called Sadiq stealth tax. So, I mean, is this a reward for failure?
No, I don't think it's a reward for failure because, you know...
Oh, it is.
Come on. Why do you think it's a reward for failure, Charlie?
Come on, why is it, Charlie? He's been re-elected 3 times.
Well, for all the reasons that Peter's just read out. I mean, we talked about...
But there are many people, there are millions of Londoners who do agree with what he's doing because they keep electing Charlie.
And it was a more convincing victory, his third than his second.
Okay,
so
let's hear from Charlie.
This is why it's so depressing because I think... Look, nobody voted for Labour in the general election in their great swathes because they thought Keir Starmer was this charismatic, brilliant politician.
Maybe they did.
They didn't.
You don't know what's in people's minds.
They didn't. The turnout was so low. And I think within the Labour Party, if you're being honest about it, I think people in the Labour Party are obviously worried and think that it's actually quite a shaky supermajority. And I think in the similar setting, if you look at the last 3 mayoral elections, certainly the last 2, the Tory party's candidate, I don't think, has set the world alight. I thought Susan was actually better than...
Whose fault's that? I mean, that's the Conservative Party's fault for not having the right candidate.
Totally. And that's why it's even more depressing, because I think if there was a good candidate, if there was someone that was able, that was selected to actually, you know, have a...
Deborah Meaden?
Well, is she?
She's on the left.
Is she on the... But Karen Brady, for example. Or
Karen Brady, yeah.
Bradley. Is it Bradley or Brady?
Karen Brady.
Karen Bradley's the ex-Northern Irish secretary.
Karen Bradley's the one I used to work for. Yes. Karen Brady is the one with all the R's in her name. She has about 17 R's in her name. And Baroness Brady, a very successful businesswoman on The Apprentice.
One of you just mentioned Susan Hall, who was the candidate last time against Sadiq. The candidate before that is Sean Bailey, very nice chap.
He's a nice
debate with him after, but he's been rewarded not just with a knighthood, but he's in the House of Lords with a job for life. So, you know, come on, Charlie.
Because he was the Boris Johnson, I think he's done a lot more work behind the scenes than Sadiq Khan.
So Sadiq Khan doesn't work hard for London, whether you agree with him or not.
Hold on, Charlie. You can't honestly argue that Lord Bailey has done more for London than Sadiq Khan. I mean, you may disagree with what Sadiq Khan has done, but it is his job over more than 10 years to work for London.
But I think Lord Bailey has a history of setting up youth clubs and cohesion and dealing with the police and sort of getting minority, black kids, basically.
I think Sean's a great guy. I don't begrudge him his place in the House of Lords, but I don't also begrudge Sadiq his knighthood.
Well, I think Sadiq Khan we talked about Gareth Southgate at the top of this programme, who was able to unite the country behind somebody when there was a great sporting football success. All Sadiq Khan has been able to do is unite everybody against him.
Apart from the millions of people who've repeatedly voted for him, Charlie.
Well, these are, I'm afraid to say, that you'll always find people that vote Labour for whatever
You will,
reason.
in quite large numbers this year.
But there are a majority...
No, not quite large numbers this year, because there were less people that voted for Labour this year than they did under Jeremy Corbyn.
But so Charlie, do you think Andy Street, the outgoing Tory leader of the West
highly successful John Lewis Partnership chief executive...
So I don't think he's got it for his time at the John Lewis Partnership. He's got it for his time... It's in the citation. He's got it for his time as Mayor of the West Midlands. And I think he deserves it just as much as Keir deserves his, as Sadiq deserves his.
Because Andy Street has not been going cap in hand at every opportunity to the government, whereas Sadiq Khan has played politics no end.
That's what their mayor's job is.
Turning up to central government saying, I need more money for TfL, it's all the government that's forcing all these strikes and all the rest of it. As soon as Labour came in, all of a sudden he doesn't need that money. Do you know why? Because it's a Labour government. Because this guy has played politics for the last 8 years as Mayor of London.
And he's done quite well.
He's increased his own PR. Yes, because all he does is spend London taxpayers' money on his PR people. That's what's ballooned, along with strikes.
His focus on air quality is of major importance to
decline, along with crime, along with a ULEZ charge, which was rejected in a by-election that we had in Uxbridge.
And in fact, we're going to be talking to the candidate who benefited from that in a little bit later on in the programme. So we will return to that. I don't think you're going to agree on Sadiq Khan.
We're not.
Well, can I just put it this way, and in a playful way, but I remember being on the House of Commons terrace last year for New Year's, as I will be this year, and when the Mayor of London put up the drones and said, Happy New Year from, the Mayor of London, there were boos on the terrace from all, playfully, but, obviously a joke, not joke type situation. I can imagine tonight will be...
Are you saying from Labour people?
Well, from who... I don't know who I think... But
presumably there are quite a few Conservatives there.
Yes, presumably you had a majority this time.
I think there was more last year than there will be this year.
I think there will. It hasn't. 2024 wasn't a happy new year for the Conservative Party. Let's talk more about Labour leaders and controversial Labour leaders, including Tony Blair, because because now we have what's happening in regard to the 20-year rule. We get lots of information that comes out in this story. It's an interesting one. Tony Blair forcing mass migration. He was warned by Jack Straw, the former Foreign Secretary. He was warned by the former Deputy Prime Minister Lord Prescott about the fact that if you let in lots of people from Eastern Europe, there are, guess what, going to be problems with pressure in public services. Charlie, what do you make of this?
Well, they were right. And, you know, that's part of the reason...
Charlie Rooney and Jack Straw and John Prescott agree.
All
is a sort of...
coalition of unity.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Well, and of course they were right. And look, there were many concerns expressed at the time about this. And, of course, anybody that did express opposition to it was branded racist, quite frankly, I think, at the time.
No, they weren't.
They were, because it was not, because we had a whole conversation.
Many people were, Matthew, there's no doubt about that.
Because there was a whole, and, you know, talking about, you know, it is not racist. There was a whole campaign, I think, at one time, saying it is not racist under Tory, I think it was in 2005, 2009 general election year. It's not racist to talk about immigration because people were too scared to talk about immigration because of the amount of people that were coming over. So those people, but that is because that lid has been put on that particular conference for so long, and you're just dismissed by immigration, as John Prescott and Jack Straw were. That has led to the situation.
Hold on a second.
But that's led to the situation we are today, where there is now, I think, much more divisive.
Matthew, I want to ask you a very simple question. Who was right, John Prescott or Tony Blair?
I think in this instance, John Prescott was right. I think the transitional control should have been put in, and if they had been, we'd still be in the European Union.
Really?
Absolutely.
It's as big a deal as that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because Jack Straw, I mean, one of the things, I mean, Jack Straw is not my favourite Labour politician. Jack Straw famously went on Newsnight and was asked directly on the BBC how many people would come, and he said a few thousand. Well, he wasn't saying that in Cabinet, so I don't know why he was saying that's what the...
Well, he was sticking to the party line.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the party line was... I mean, it needed to put a figure on it like that. I think what people felt was that they were promised that only a few thousand would come, and a lot more people came in short order.
But Tony Blair was saying only a few thousand would come. I mean, he was saying that this would be a small number, that this wouldn't be major, and it actually led to £200,000 a year, 200,000 people, I should say, a year net migration.
Yeah, which of course is absolutely nothing compared to what we saw when Boris took the controls off, when Charlie was advising the Tory government, when took the controls off post Brexit and let basically anybody in. We've had now 3 years of unparalleled net migration, higher than we under the Labour government, and certainly higher than this EU migration. Remember, a lot of these people, because of the nature of EU migration, actually did go home. They came to work and to go home. We've seen people coming and staying longer now, particularly because the Tories took the break off in terms of partner visas.
Charlie, in terms of this migration aspect, do you agree with Matthew that actually if Tony Blair had made a different decision, Brexit may not have happened? I mean, it's a big statement to make in a sort of counterfactual narrative, is it not?
Well, I do actually, yes. I do think I agree, but I'm agreeing with you on this New Year's sort of new approach.
Yeah.
I do.
Maybe you could give him a knighthood.
Because I think
Sir Matthew Lazar.
Well,
I'm waiting for Lords. It's more lucrative.
He'll be waiting a long time.
Charlie,
it's packed. We've had 30 on them. But anyway, I do, because I think immigration was such a hot topic during the Brexit referendum, and it was about immigration and integration of communities, and that's, I think, part of the failure when you've seen such an increase in the numbers. But also, I think there are a lot of people who were reluctant, Remainers or reluctant Brexiteers, people that thought, not quite sure which way, but they just thought on balance, to take back control of your money, borders and laws. If it was just taking back control of your laws, well, I think you could maybe had an argument against that, because actually we've got representation in Europe. Or anyway, it could have been a much different debate. But immigration, particularly in northern seats, in the red wall that used to be, where people deserted the Labour Party in 2019, voted Conservative, now look as if they're going to vote Reform. These are people that are consistently, in particular areas, feel immigration is a number one topic for them, because it impacts on the economy and jobs and opportunity and public services, and that has not gone away for over the best part of a decade. So I think Matthew...
I think Blair may have said that this is one of his biggest mistakes. Maybe not putting in the judicial controls.
He said freedom of information was his biggest
mistake, yes.
I'm not sure that's right.
I'm not sure that is quite right.
I'm going to go with the illegal war in Iraq. I'm probably going to go with that.
I said one of the biggest, not the biggest.
No, well, he said
freedom of information. But I think because anybody who thinks we should still be in the European Union would say that why on earth we didn't do it, and that's why these documents are so fascinating, because other countries did put in these transitional controls, which would certainly have calmed the debate down, would have allowed it to be much more.
Or maybe they should have listened to David Cameron when he wanted to reform things as well. There's so many historical what-ifs in this regard, and the archives, the 20-year archives, just become fascinating in that regard. Certainly immigration's still a big topic. We're going to talk about small boots in a second, and we're going to take a little look at Nigel Farage's not quite New Year message, but it's come out today, so it's pretty much the New Year message from Blenheim, where of course Blenheim Palace, where of course Churchill was born. We'll look at a couple of clips of what Nigel Farage has been saying and get reaction from Charlie and from Matthew. That's in just a minute here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to Angela, who's been in touch. She says that the Venetia Menzies interview, that was the one about Gaza we did a little bit earlier on in the programme. She says, thank you for featuring the story from a brave journalist trying to get a balanced view of the Gazan people cutting through the propaganda. Well, thank you, Angela. Venetia certainly did that, and she is... this is the first time she's been on one of my programmes, so it's certainly not going to be the last time. Let me tell you, very, very interesting journalist, and we will hear more from her. I want to talk a bit about Keir Starmer now. We'll talk about Nigel Farage as well in a second. Starmer under growing pressure to tackle the small boots crisis. This is because the number of migrants reaching Britain this month is up by more than 200% on last December following a Christmas surge. 291 arrivals on Monday. That was when at least 3 people very sadly died off the coast of France. The monthly total now 3,254. and that is a record for the month of December, nearly 3 times last year. Matthew Lassett, this is not getting any better. And Keir Starmer, OK, it's been less than 6 months. Maybe we need to give him a little bit of time to sort things out. But he's talked about this being a priority. Is it?
Well, he famously didn't mention it as a priority when he did his non-relaunch relaunch just a few weeks ago, where it appeared in the document, but it didn't appear in his speech, and it didn't appear on the 6 key priorities that were literally flying above his head at this big event. So I think what he needs to do, particularly as we've seen with the continued rise of reform, I think he does need to make it a priority. I think that the government needs to do good work on smashing the gangs, which was the slogan that they used in the election in terms of police cooperation. They've set up the border command, but I'm afraid the government is going to have to work out what it's going to do in terms of turning boats back or immediate processing, because the current numbers are basically not sustainable politically, and they're not sustainable for the people who, literally, we're not seeing life sustained, we're seeing deaths all the time, which is just absolutely appalling. So from every perspective, I think a directed approach, which is, I'm afraid, can involve a deal with the French.
I mean, we already give them the thick end of £1 billion.
Absolutely, for which we get, basically not much back, to put it mildly. I was going to be rude in that, but I won't be. And therefore, I think what you need to do is be pretty hard with the French. The problem at the moment is French politics is in turmoil. We've seen 2 prime ministers in 2 months. A president on the edge who's not exactly about to do Britain a favour. So it's not easy, but it does need to go right to the top of the priority list.
What do you think of the Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary? He says Labour chose to cancel the Rwanda deterrent before it even started. These latest figures show that was a catastrophic mistake. I call on Keir Starmer to urgently reverse course and introduce a removals deterrent. And the point is, there is no deterrent.
Well, the ultimate deterrent is people being processed quickly and sent back when they.
But that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Well, there has been. The government has done a bit more on sending people back who are from safe countries. There have actually been more. I think that's correct to say there have been more removals than there were in the same period under the previous government. I don't think Rwanda would have worked. As we know, it was literally, we talked about wasting money with the French. It was wasting a lot of money for a scheme that was never going to work. So what we actually need to do is a deal to see people in northern France not coming here, which means a deal with the French and by extension with the rest of Europe.
Charlie, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think Chris is absolutely right, actually, the Shadow Home Secretary. I mean, there was a deterrent in place. We never saw how that would have been impacted or how it would have worked, because Labour cancelled it on day one. And therefore, you now see a situation...
It was illegal at that time still, Charlie, of course. It hadn't actually been approved by the courts.
Well, that's a question between the government and the courts, and who makes the laws and who the lawmakers. That's the government at the time who voted on the Rwanda policy.
30 years to get the ECHR.
Rishi Sunak didn't have all that amount of time, and he came up with the policy, and it was actually something that obviously took a long time for the Home Office to get to grips with. But there was a policy in place. The Rwanda scheme was up and running. There was money that was sent to Rwanda. Labour made a commitment in their in the election to cancel it on day one. They did do that. That's probably the only thing that they've actually been successful in since their election. And now you're seeing the numbers. This time, and compared to the last, 3 times as many people that have taken that crossing that have entered this country illegally. It is not sustainable.
Not 3 times across the whole period.
It is. Three times compared this time last year, December.
Well, it's the December figures themselves.
3 times up. Yes.
Well, let's see what another political figure has talked. We talked about the Conservatives, we talked about Labour on this. Nigel Farage has a video message out today. We'll be getting various messages on New Year's, thoughts from Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer. Traditionally, we'll get them tomorrow. But Nigel Farage was at Blenheim Palace, the birthplace of Churchill, and had his today. It's about a 6-minute video. We'll just play a couple of clips from it, and let's hear what Nigel Farage had to say on border control.
We're going to campaign for proper border controls. The fact that now 150,000 people, nearly all of them young men, have been able to catch dinghies across the English Channel and come into this country, frankly, is an outrage to everybody. But it isn't just that. Legal migration. Look at 2023. A Conservative Party in power promising us that net migration will be tens of thousands a year, and it was nearly 1 million.
That's Nigel Farage talking at Blenheim Palace, giving his New Year's message. He also spoke about what he believes is the UK being a country in decline. This is what Nigel Farage said.
You know, the fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people, and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
Charlie, what do you make of Nigel Farage's comments there, both on border control and a country in decline?
Well, as an act of goodwill to Labour, I know what it's like. If you promise something time and time again and don't deliver, you'll get punished. And that's what happened this year at the ballot box when the Tories, as Nigel said, repeatedly said that they would bring migration, net migration legal, down from the hundreds of thousands to the tens of thousands. That was something Cameron promised in 2010, I think, as far back. And 15 years later, that didn't happen. And that was repeated time and time again at different successive general elections. And therefore, we've been punished for it. So I think, my only New Year's message to the Labour government is that, however well-intentioned things are that you believe in, that you want to deliver, and what you think will make the country better, you've got to be able to deliver it. And I think if Labour don't, and it looks as though, because those numbers are up on migration, that they're failing at the minute. Maybe need a bit more time, but they're not achieving it at the minute. Same with growth. That's been revised, but again, they need to maybe have a bit more time to see where things go. But they're failing in doing what they said that they were going to do. That gives rise to Nigel Farage, because when people then start to feel poorer, when they start to see that the migration crisis hasn't been tackled, when they start to see that there isn't that economic growth, all of which has been promised to them by successive governments, Labour and Tory, you do feel there's a societal decline. You do tend to look for the negatives in life rather than the positives, and you might think your community is more broken than what it is, and that is what gives rise to Farage. That's what gives him rise in the polls, and that's why I think he's going to become even more popular in 2025.
A major worry for Keir Starmer, presumably, Matthew?
Yeah, I think it's a worry of both party leaders. I mean, if I was Kemi, I would be especially worried, because I think one of my predictions for 2025 is that we will regularly see Reform second in the polls. With Labour at first, I think the Labour vote will stabilise where it is.
Well, we have seen a poll where the Conservatives have been first and Reform have been second.
Yeah,
and Labour
absolutely.
have been third as well.
Absolutely. I think that it will stabilise with not much between the three of them, but with Labour just at the top. But it's clearly a worry for both parties. However, I think 2025 is going to be the year when Nigel comes under scrutiny, and his nice comments saying Britain is in decline, these generalisms are going to be challenged. I mean, it's slightly ironic him delivering this in Blenheim, which is right in the middle of a seat that the Lib Dems swept to in Oxfordshire.
Birthplace of Churchill, though.
Yes, exactly. I'm slightly surprised they let him in, actually. People, historic houses and museums tend not to like people doing politics in them. But I mean, right in the heart of Oxfordshire, where the entire county now has Labour and Lib Dem MPs, you have to realise that we have got mass social change in this country, and that the electorate is significantly changing. So even in this poll we saw this week, you've got kind of graduate seats like those in Oxfordshire staying on the progressive wing, and you've got traditional heartlands going blue or turquoise. So I think that's going to be the big theme of 25.
Well, at Blenheim Palace, they did let in Theresa May and Donald Trump, didn't they? For a little.
Well, that was the government.
A little walk down the stairs, or walk up the stairs, or but maybe the establishment, as you say, museums, if they're part of the establishment, they actually think that maybe Nigel's right, and that's why they've let him in.
I don't know what the views of Blenheim Palace
we wait comment.
We wait comment from Blenheim Palace. Listen, thank you both very much indeed. Happy New Year to you
and
both.
To you and everybody listening.
Yes, indeed. Matthew Lassett there and Charlie Rooney, former advisors, Labour and Conservative, respectively. We also have a bit of breaking news, and we've been talking on this programme indeed yesterday about the World Bowls Tour and the fact that they had excluded Israeli participants, and now the World Bowls Tour has announced a U-turn of its decision to withdraw the invitations of 3 Israeli bowlers from next week's World Indoor Championships in Norfolk. It says significant additional security measures have been put in place, meaning it can now welcome Israeli athletes. So there we are, a U-turn on that, and rightly so, in my opinion. Thank you to Dave, who's been in touch from Portsmouth. He says, I totally agree with Sharron Davies, people getting rewarded for basically screwing things up. Cannes ruined London. Southgate won nothing. It's about time decent hard-working achievers like the charity volunteers get some mention. P.S. Sharron Davies looks amazing, says Dave. Well, thank you I suppose on Sharon's behalf for that, but appreciate your message. We're going to talk in a second to Paul Gambaccini, who is himself obviously a hugely successful music impresario and DJ, about the very sad death of Johnny Walker, who has died at the age of 79. We'll have a little bit of that, and we will talk to you as well. And if you want to get your thoughts on the air between now and 7, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, and you can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text, or you can tweet me at talkTV, or indeed follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to come here on Talk in just a minute.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, we've been reacting in the last hour or so to the very sad news that Johnny Walker, the BBC DJ, has died at the age of 79. He was on air for 58 years and did Sounds of the 70s on BBC Radio 2. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have heard him, who know who he was, certainly, and there have been tributes paid by many people. Let's get one of them now from Paul Gambaccini, himself a radio legend, who joins us now. Paul, thank you for speaking to us this afternoon. It's interesting, actually, because we'll talk about Johnny Walker in regard to his life and legacy in a moment, but we remember, of course, he played a very important, almost political role, actually, when the Marine Offences Act came into force in 1967, in August 1967, essentially outlawing many pirate radio stations. And he made an on-air speech right up to the top of the hour on Radio Caroline. Just tell us a little bit about his important role in that regard.
Well, Harold Wilson wanted to can popular music from the radio, classics for him, but the public wouldn't let him. Johnny was just too popular. And he would broadcast from the boats, and people would sit parked on the shore, shining their light out at him. And then he made the famous last speech, defiant, but legal. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then he was quickly brought over to the terrestrial stations.
He joined Radio 1 in 1967, I think, and Radio 2 in 1998, so, sorry, 1969, apologies, they joined Radio 1. Just tell us about what sort of DJ he was, how he connected with his listeners, Paul.
Johnny was intimate with his listeners. It was kind of strange because it seemed he was closer to his listeners than he was to his friends. But he was utterly dedicated to his music. He played the songs of the artists that he loved. Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed was one that he got past the management, who didn't understand what he was talking about. And we loved him, but he never held back. He was famous for telling fans of the Bay City Rollers that they could take a running jump. And then he did, in fact, get suspended from Radio 1, so he went to California, to a station called KSAN, K-S-A-N. And he loved the California artists of the time, Country Joe and the Fish, Grateful Dead, Steve Miller Band. So he was just happy as a duck swimming in a pond.
And what do you think his legacy will be as we look back on 58 years on the airwaves for Johnny Walker?
Well, the first is love your listeners. The second is love your music. And the third is love what you do. You can't beat it.
And Paul, how will you remember him? Because, of course, you knew him personally and were someone who was in that milieu and, of course, a long-term and very successful broadcaster yourself. What will you remember about him personally?
I remember him as a very brave man, a very talented man, and a very dedicated man.
Excellent. And are you... How will you think of him in the next few days, of course, because there will be so many tributes that will be paid, of course, and there will be a time to say goodbye as well. There must be a lot of people very upset because 79 is really not it's not old these days. He had...
It's not old, not when you're 75 like me. But I have been told to prepare a tribute program to him.
Okay, yeah.
And then we will have to see what the public wants in terms of some kind of service.
Yeah. Paul, thank you very much indeed. That's Paul Gambaccini there, a radio presenter and long-time music impresario himself. He is someone who knew Johnny Walker, and we pay tribute to Johnny Walker today, who has died at the age of 79, and indeed the head of Radio 2 has paid tribute to him. He was on Radio 2, Radio 1, Radio Caroline, and so many different stations as well. Ken Bruce as well, the former Radio 2 host, said, "So sorry to hear the news about the great Johnny Walker. Not only was a wonderful broadcaster, but also a man of great personal strength and kindness." So we will certainly continue. If you want to pay your tributes, feel free to do so. I want to talk as well about the controversy today in regard to the awarding of knighthoods, especially and other honours as well, especially to Sir Sadiq Khan. Andrew is in Hertfordshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, tell us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, you and the team there, as an element. First of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, you do a great job. Look, Peter, it was all very jocular earlier, in relation to Sadiq Khan and so on and so forth. This isn't funny. That man is personally responsible for many families having a bad Christmas, this Christmas and forever, because their children were killed by knife crime in London. And if you have any heart, think of that poor child, 7, who watched her mother be slaughtered at the Notting Hill Carnival. That child saw her mother killed. And Keir Starmer has ennobled a man who's personally responsible for that.
Well, he didn't. I mean, look, there's definitely, I totally agree with you, Andrew, that there's a lot more, of course, that could have been done. Now, the knife crime has increased by more than 50%. Violent crime in the capital has soared. Violent crime up 30% from 190,000 incidents to 250,000 in the past year. But, I mean, if you're talking about individual knife crime incidents, the people who wielded those knives, they're to blame for that, are they not?
No, and I get why we're going to have a discussion about this. The Notting Hill Carnival cannot carry on. Each year we accept between 3 to 12 deaths. And he signs that off. He knows that's going to happen. And that child will never see its mother, and its mother died in front of it. Now, I know we have a discussion about it. I'm more than happy to go to dinner with you and sit down and discuss it at a stronger point. That man is personally responsible for that. And you look at London now, it's a third world shanty town. You look at those demonstrations against Jewish people on a Saturday. That is disgraceful.
Yeah. And certainly the role of the Metropolitan Police, and he is the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police. Should he not have got the knighthood? What about lots of other politicians? You know, Dame Emily Thornberry, for example. There are Conservatives as well. We know Gavin Williamson in the past. He was not seen as a particularly good education secretary. We've got people like Sean Bailey, who didn't become Mayor of London, who was put in the Lords. I mean, does the system work?
The system works because out there are very good people who work within the community, put effort in, and they are rewarded, and they should be. The system doesn't work when someone who is responsible year on year for people dying, and he does nothing to change that. He has set London against London. If you think of that young girl beaten to death in Iran for wearing a hijab, why didn't we have a month in London where everybody didn't wear a hijab? Because he couldn't do it. Because he's held hostage by his bigotry and racist attitude.
Well, I'm sure he would deny being a bigot and a racist, but listen, thank you very much, Andrew. I really appreciate your thoughts on that, Andrew in Hertfordshire. Give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Sadiq Khan, as a person, as a political figure, certainly elicits lots of strong opinions, as does Gareth Southgate. We're going to be talking about him in a second in the sport. Barry says, surely the King could decide whether someone is suitable for a New Year honour. Well, it's not really his role to do so. There's an advisory committee, a nominations committee that comes up with what these things are. Anyone actually can nominate anybody for a gong, for an honour. That can happen, and it is considered, and then some go forward and some do not. Ben in Plymouth says, hi Peter, Gareth Southgate failed at Premier League management. He is tactically inept at top-level football. So when the Football Association appointed him, my eyes rolled. Nothing but dire football and bad team selection for years under his tenure. Well, we will be discussing that in the sport in just a second. In fact, on the other side of the break, including the former England manager Gareth Southgate, who has got a knighthood in the New Year's honours. And thank you to Mary in County Down in Northern Ireland, where I was for Christmas, who has said, you're only back in London 2 minutes and you already said milieu. I'm sending a slap to the back of the head for that. That is Mary in County Down, who is a frequent listener and indeed contributor to this programme, who always keeps me right, as is the role of many viewers and listeners to this programme. Keep my feet on the ground on all occasions, especially when I'm going around using words like milieu. We'll talk about the sport in just a second here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen, and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger, or, you know, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well, and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Taff in Dover, who says, "Afternoon, Peter, with Sadiq Khan and Gareth Southgate getting a knighthood for failing, it's a total disgrace that Kevin Sinfield, the ex-rugby player who has done so much for motor neurone disease, is overlooked yet again. Thanks for the shows in 2014. Have a great 2025. Thank you, Taff. Appreciate that. Gary in Canvey Island says, "Don't forget Khan also came out in support of Chris Cabba, and I'm sure that he knew the background as his position in mayor and responsible for the Met Police." Well, he may not have known the full story in regard to Chris Cabba, and there's a lot of nuance around that, so I just want to be careful with that, Gary. But certainly there were a number of people who really said things they shouldn't have said in regard to Chris Cabba, who, it's very sad that he's dead, but he wasn't a nice person, and we need to be absolutely realistic about that, and I think the policeman did the right thing. Sarah in Stoke says Andrew is right. If it was a football match or any other event where you could almost guarantee there would be 3 fatalities every time it went ahead, the event would be cancelled on safety grounds. Khan is complicit in these deaths. I mean, Sarah, he's not complicit in these deaths. In Sarah's view, he is, but I just want to be careful legally about that. We're not suggesting that Sadiq Khan is. This is Sarah's opinion. When he continues to allow the Notting Hill Carnival to carry on despite knowing innocent people will be killed simply for attending, yet he is not held accountable. And thank you to Mike in Spain, who says, "Dear Peter, Happy New Year. I'm proud to be the recipient of an MBE for services to peace and normalisation in Northern Ireland. My family received a British Empire Medal for gallantry, also an OBE for services to counter terrorism. My brother-in-law received an MBE for services in Afghanistan. My uncle received an OBE for services to charity. I should write a book. However, I am minded to hand back my MBE because of the crass decision to award Sadiq Khan a knighthood," says Mike in Spain. Well, listen, we will park that issue just for a second, but if you do want to get in on it between now and 7, 0344 499 1000, and we'll talk about another knighthood controversy, because now it's time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Because Gareth Southgate, or Sir Gareth as he is now known, he has been rewarded for transforming the fortunes and culture of the England football team with a knighthood in the New Year's honours list. He's 54 years old. He's led England to consecutive European Championship runners-up finishes and the 2018 World Cup semi-finals during his 8 years in charge, before stepping down after the 2-1 loss to Spain in the Euro 2024 final. Well, I'm delighted that Max is here with us, Max Scott, who's a TalkSport reporter. Max, no doubt this is a big controversy. Absolutely. What are people saying to you? What is the footballing community thinking about this?
Well, on TalkSport, you know, there's naturally a mixed reaction. I understand but I do think the overwhelming feeling from die-hard football fans is that he, you know, reflected in some of the messages that you read out, is that Gareth Southgate shouldn't have got the knighthood because he didn't win anything. I understand that case on a sort of on a basic level. But equally, you know, if you look at the influence of Gareth Southgate on English football, I think there is a case that it's a well-deserved knighthood as well. So I can sort of understand it both ways. You've got to remember this award was for services to association football. This wasn't just about what he achieved on the pitch as an England manager. I think for context, we need to remember that before he was England manager, he was head of development for the FA, and he went across the country to academies, to FA counties, saying we need to develop skillful technical players. Fast forward to 2024, and although that trophy, look at the talent and the technique and the skill of players like Cole Palmer, players like Phil Foden, you know, just Jude Bellingham, all over the pitch. England have a vast amount of players who are world class in and of themselves. And there is a really strong argument to say that it's Gareth Southgate that changed that philosophy. So I understand...
So he's sort of turning the ship a bit. He may not have necessarily brought the trophies home, but in terms of what he's actually done with the team, that is something that is, planning perhaps for the future. I saw the James Graham play about this. This is really the only reason I know anything about this, but the sort of psychological...
This is England.
This is England, yeah. Great, really excellent play, actually. This was on in London, and I'm sure it will be repeated elsewhere. And really, it was about changing the dynamic, changing the thought process, changing the kind of idea of what it was to be a player for England and the purpose of that.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, when you talk about leadership, really what we're basically talking about is influence. And Gareth Southgate's influence on the sort of the FA, football in this country, is huge. In a time where trust in public servants is at an all-time low, Gareth Southgate was a statesman-like leader, made people proud of the people that represented them, made players proud to play for England again. Before Gareth Southgate, the culture was completely toxic. Players not eating with one another in the canteen unless they were on the same team, club team. And so I think that the way that Gareth Southgate set standards, acted with real integrity, was a man of great humility and compassion.
So you're happy enough for this night out by the sound of things?
Well, yeah, I am, I think. And I would say, and I know this isn't sort of, this isn't top-line riveting opinion, but I don't really mind either way. I'm not outraged by...
You'll have no success in this station if you continue with an attitude like that, Marks.
I wouldn't be outraged if he didn't get it, but I look at the man and I look at the influence that he's had on football and certainly think that he is deserving of that. And I can absolutely guarantee you that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, English football fans that bemoan Gareth Southgate will look back and think, thank God he was in charge and did what he did, because I think that any success that comes with England, it will be standing on the shoulders of what he built.
Someone whose reputation is perhaps not as good. Sorry, is there a problem with the microphone? Is that rubbing or something against you? I'm just hearing a little problem with the audio there. Maybe it's rubbing against your shirt. We're going to sort that out. But Wayne Rooney has been sacked as Plymouth manager. His time has come to an end after only 7 months with the... Oh, no, we're still getting this problem. Is it your microphone? Can we perhaps... I know this is going to be very annoying for the listeners especially, so we'll just get it sorted out there. Wayne Rooney's time at Plymouth has come to an end after only 7 months, with the Championship club announcing they have mutually agreed to part ways with immediate effect from the former Manchester United and England forward. He released a statement to address claims he took a woman back to his flat, which he denied. What do you make of all of this? What's going on?
Well, look, the sort of... Wayne Rooney seems to attract so much attention outside of what his job is.
Never knowingly controversial.
But it's important to say that Wayne Rooney's come out and categorically said that video was completely doctored.
Okay.
It was
we're just putting another microphone on Max here. I have often been told when it comes to our viewers and listeners, they'll sometimes tolerate a slight problem with the video, but people will not tolerate an audio problem. So our hero, Shalape, the assistant producer, is coming in and reconnecting Max to the matrix here, making sure that his microphone is properly attached. So Max, apologies to interrupt you there. Shalape, thank you for your heroic action there. Tell us your thoughts on Wayne Rooney.
Look, you know, just around those claims about a woman entering his apartment, he claims that video was cut up. He was showing a couple an apartment. His son was in the apartment, and he's categorically denied it. So to important matters regarding his job, he went into Plymouth, and there's loads of, why someone like Wayne Rooney took a job of a Championship side trying to stay in the league with very little funds is beyond me, and questions around the wisdom of that career choice. But equally, you could argue it's quite valiant of him. He's desperate to be a manager. Since he's been sacked today, there's lots of talk about the fact that he should just remain as a pundit, because he's actually incredibly insightful, really entertaining pundit. But, it's damning. 18 points he got in 23 games, just 1 win in 14. So it's not looking good for his managerial career. Just hasn't been defined by any sort of meaningful success. So not very good for Wayne Rooney at all.
Another problem for his former club now, Manchester United, losing their 4th game in a row, 2-0 to Newcastle, with the manager Ruben Amorim. Is that how you pronounce it? Amorim. Sorry, I bust this every day. In his post-match interview, saying his team are in a relegation battle this season to stay in the Premier League. Why has it gone so wrong at Manchester United? What needs to change?
Well, we talk about crumbling great British institutions, and Manchester United is one of them. Look, ultimately, and I'm not a Manchester United fan, but I don't say this with any joy whatsoever, but Manchester United is a club rotten to the core in terms of its culture. And this is not the fault of Ruben Amorim. He's come in quite valiantly to try to save Manchester United, and what we're seeing is just a natural occurrence of how awfully the club is being run. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, supposedly, you know, a Manchester United boyhood fan, has come in and has managed to turn all of the goodwill that fans had towards him into dust. He has just gone on this huge sort of financial cutting regime to try to save about £1 million at Manchester United, which is, the drop of an ocean. There's been redundancies. All non-playing staff had their Christmas bonuses cancelled, which is ridiculous considering the fact that Manchester United are a perfect example of a football team with players that are completely overpaid. He's cut funding to Manchester United's own charity. And Ruben Amorim, bless him, has come in and, it's just a complete mess, essentially. He admitted to TalkSport last night, this is shocking, that it is a fact that his players cannot play the system he wants. And he's admitted that they are in he hasn't ruled out that they're in a relegation fight. They're 7 points off the bottom three, Peter, which for Manchester United is an all-time low. They've lost 3 games consecutively at home. That hasn't happened in Premier League history. The last time that happened was in 1979. I speak to a lot of Manchester United fans in my job, and actually, a lot of them aren't welcoming this by any stretch, but say this needs to happen. They need to hit an all-time low in order to sort of rebuild. And there's no doubt that Ruben Amorim is capable of doing this. The way that he communicates and articulates himself, compared to Erik ten Hag, is really impressive. There's no doubt that he is a special manager, but the players at his disposal are simply not good enough. So, this narrative of Manchester United being completely below par, being overwhelmingly disappointing, is going to continue for years. Because there are rumours that Sir Jim Ratcliffe, his pockets aren't deep enough to buy in the January transfer window coming tomorrow. And so the players at Amorim's disposal are going to be the same for the rest of the season, likely. And so, it's not good for Manchester United, but ultimately it's what needs to be done to rebuild that once great football club.
Max, thank you very much indeed. That's TalkSport reporter Max Scott bringing us right up to date there. And Stephen Bromsgrove has been in touch. He says, regarding Gareth Southgate, the measure for me is Sir Alf Ramsey. He was knighted for winning the World Cup with England. It devalues that wonderful achievement immensely for Southgate to be knighted. Give him a CBE maximum, says Stephen Bromsgrove. And thanks to Ben in Plymouth, who says that Southgate just ticked cultural boxes in his management. And Ben has advocated that I deserve a knighthood for my services to journalism. I don't think I do somehow, but it's very kind of you to say so, Ben. Appreciate that. And lots of people have said lots of nice things this afternoon. Not going to read all of them out, but thank you for those responses. And thank you to everybody else who has got in touch. There's plenty more time in the next hour to make sure that you can get your voice heard. You can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000, no matter what the topic is that you want to talk about. We'll be talking in a second to Steve Tuckwell, who is a former Conservative MP, about what the fortunes of the Conservative parties are, especially in London, in the next few minutes here on Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the process, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this evening. I'm here between now and 7. James Max will be here between 7 and 10. And then Petri Hoskin from 10 until 1 a.m. will welcome in 2025 with you at midnight. There's lots to talk about, including the New Year honours. Sir Sadiq Khan will be talking to his nemesis, Steve Tuckwell, the former Conservative MP, who became the MP and indeed succeeded Boris Johnson as MP for South Ruislip and Uxbridge. We'll talk to him about the Conservatives and what they need to do in 2025 to bring things back. We've talked a lot about Labour in this programme. We'll talk a little bit about Reform UK as well, because Nigel Farage has his New Year's message out. We'll be hearing one tomorrow from Keir Starmer and indeed Kemi Badenoch. Also, we'll be talking about a big scandal in Northern Ireland I'll tell you more about in about 30 seconds' time, and the Royals as well. How things are, what we expect from the Royal family in 2025, and we'll be talking to someone who has received a gong this year, one of those brave people in the Horizon scandal, the post office, the postmasters and sub-postmasters who got through that and indeed has got a gong. So we'll talk about that, and we'll get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Stay with us here on Talk. So in just a minute or two, we're going to talk about a story in Northern Ireland. It's a really, really interesting story. There's a woman called Katie Mitchell. She is 19, she is non-verbal and has severe autism. And her family have said that she was left traumatised after being removed from a shop where she wanted to buy a DVD by police officers. Now, she has sort of the mind of a toddler. That's what her family have said. And what happened was she was attempting to buy a Thomas the Tank Engine DVD from a shop. She was unable to buy it as the store had just closed its tills. She couldn't understand what was going on. The mother said, look, could you just pay the £2 in some way? Is there some way we can sort this out? The mother even offered to come back the next day with the DVD to see if they could take a photo. They would have the barcode. You know, they tried all sorts of different ways to try to say, look, this is someone who is severely autistic, is non-verbal and can't understand why she can't have this DVD that she wants. And she was crying. And then apparently, according to Eileen Mitchell, who is the sister of this woman, she said that my sister was told to get out of the shop and choice words were used. There was no understanding, there was no empathy, there was no awareness from police. Police officers were then called and took her out. And just if you're watching, if you're not watching, if you're listening, I will describe this to you. But we'll just watch this short clip now of this woman being sort of manhandled and carried out of the shop. It's not a nice thing, and it's causing a huge controversy. Let's just play this clip.
Cops taking a child out of a video shop over a £2 tape that she couldn't get.
Great PSNA of Northern Ireland.
So this is police officers from Northern Ireland holding this woman and bringing her out of the shop. It's something that many people think shouldn't have happened. We'll be talking to John Burrows, a former senior officer in the police service of Northern Ireland, about this very soon. We'll get reaction as well. I'm going to read out a statement from a mental health charity. Certainly the family are very, very annoyed about it. And if you want to switch on your TV, if you want to show on YouTube or switch on your smart TV, you'll see in a few minutes' time we're going to play that video again, and you can make up your own mind about what has happened. And this is the 19-year-old woman who was carried out of a shop, clearly very distressed. Right then, we'll return to that in just a minute, but I just wanted to give you some idea of what that story was before we covered it. Now I want to talk to Steve Tuckwell. He's a former Conservative MP, and he was the successor to Boris Johnson as the MP for South Ruislip and Oxbridge. And Steve scored a famous victory in a by-election there, but then lost his seat at the general election. Steve, it's great to have you on the programme. Tell me your thoughts about the fact that Sadiq Khan is now Sir Sadiq Khan. Presumably you're not too happy about that.
Well, I think it's astonishing, and I'm absolutely baffled as to how, a reward for failure can be given to the Mayor of London. If you look at his track record in London since he's been in power since 2016, I think every single metric that he's responsible for, he's failed on, whether that's crime's gone up, he's missed housing targets, we've seen dysfunctional transport policies, and we've also seen, his part of council tax has gone up over 70% since 2016. So, we should be looking at these very special honours reserved for unique achievements in society, whether that's public service, for bravery, for charity work. And we've seen that in the honours list. But for this particular award, there'll be many people in outer London.
Are they actually reserved for those people, Steve, though? Because we've seen people like Sean Bailey, for example, who didn't make it to be Mayor of London, who went to the Lords. We've seen Gavin Williamson in your party, who's someone who was seen to be a very bad education secretary. He got a knighthood. I mean, this is what all political parties do, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think when you look at Sadiq Khan's track record in London, he's abysmal. It's devastated the nighttime economy. We've seen taxes increase. We've seen the transport system brought to its knees with the Piccadilly line and Central line, and we've seen crime soar through the roof. So, how can the establishment be rewarding failure of this magnitude?
Some might argue that's what the Conservative Party did as well. But listen, let's talk more broadly about the Conservative Party. What does Kemi Badenoch need to do in 2025 to get her mojo back a little bit? There are people saying, look, she's only been there for maybe 10 weeks or so, maybe not even as long as that. Let's just give her a bit of a chance. But there are definitely Conservatives that I've spoken to who say, like, something needs to change pretty rapidly here. What's your view? What's your take on this?
Well, certainly the general election result was very bruising for the Conservative Party. I know from experience, as I'm a former MP now. But we also had a very clear and good quality leadership election with 6 really good high quality candidates, and it was a long period, but we came out with Kemi as our leader. And one of the things we need to be doing now is getting behind her, giving her the time to take stock of the situation that we're in and really renew the party and win back the public trust. And I had very close links with Kemi during my time in Parliament, and I've seen firsthand her determination, her willpower, her stamina, and she will be the person that's going to sort of, like, as you say, get the Conservative Party's mojo back.
But you sort of say will in future, and maybe she will, and maybe that's what will happen in 2025. But has she made a good start, do you think? Has she really changed anything so far, or maybe it just sort of takes time a little bit?
Well, I think the latter is very key here, and I think we do need to be taking time. As I said, it was a bruising general election defeat, and we need to be really looking deep into the soul of the Conservative Party to understand what went wrong, learn from the mistakes that were made, and be ready to really renew right from the bottom up, involving our members, involving the public. Winning that public trust back is really important so that we are ready with good quality policies, and then we're ready to govern whenever the next election is called.
We will hear, I would imagine, from Kemi Badenoch tomorrow. She'll have a New Year's message, as will Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. But today we've heard from Nigel Farage. I just want to play a little bit of what he has said in his New Year's message.
I want to say this to you. If you agree with what we're trying to do, don't just sit back and nod. Do something about it. Join those 150,000 people who've already joined our party. Because I promise you this, the only way we win, the only way we mend broken Britain, the only way we get reform in our country that so badly needs it is if you, who agree with us, join our People's Army.
So that's Nigel Farage asking people to join Reform UK. Of course, many people have, and they have more members, they say, than the Conservative Party, certainly in regard to what's on the public record, and there has been a bit of a row about that. He also talked about a country in decline.
Well, I think we've certainly seen, some disasters.
The fish rots from the head down. We have been appallingly led in this country now for several decades. We are in societal decline. We are in economic decline. Most people are getting poorer with every year that passes. We're losing any sense of national identity. And we're actually teaching kids at school that people like Winston Churchill, born in this palace, are bad people, and that our country's history is something to be ashamed of.
Steve, the constituency you represented there in South Ruislip and Oxbridge, there will be, I know it's very split between Conservatives, Labour and Reform UK. Do you disagree with anything that Nigel Farage has said there?
Well, I think one of the things that Nigel is very good at in his politics is pointing at problems. And I think the thing that he doesn't have and he lacks is the substance of, what he's actually going to do about the problems that he's continually pointing at. What we'll see with Kemi is we'll see, a proper review, a proper renewal of the Conservative values, and we'll see those policies come out in the coming weeks and months that will chime with the electorate, not just the members, but the people that actually vote as well. And we'll see that come through. Now, if you look at the by-election, the number of council by-elections that have happened since the general election, I think the Conservatives have won 83% of those council by-elections, and that actually says something. So I think we need to be continuing with that message, continuing to renew our policies and continuing to hold this Labour government to account after a very disastrous start to their tenure in government.
Steve, thank you very much indeed. That is Steve Tuckwell there. He's a former Conservative MP, and we talked about Reform UK, we talked about the Conservatives, talked a little bit about the Liberal Democrats and of course Labour as well. We're also talking in just a minute about this story in regard to what happened in Northern Ireland. This is a number of people, it really is a national issue as well. It's not just about Northern Ireland, it's about this young woman who has been carried out of a shop attempting to buy a DVD. She's autistic, basically non-verbal as well. Clearly a very traumatic experience for her and her sister and family. Very, very annoyed about all of that. And Stuart says, has been in touch to say, the autistic teen story is terrible and made even worse compared to shoplifters who'd be allowed to walk freely from a shop. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger or, you know, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Anne is in Sussex and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Anne, you're very welcome to the programme. I think you want to react to Sadiq Khan. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't think I'm the only person in the country that is amazed that he should be rewarded for failure. But one of the issues that inspired me to ring as well was the fact that I don't think people in positions of power understand the racism that's among the different races. And the big cities are a real mixture of people from various countries. And I remember my son-in-law when he was in Dover and living there, and it was the Kosovans, you know, what was going on there, always falling out, always, you know, I think we've ignored that kind of racism and hatred. Why we can just say it's probably the British white don't like, but that I'm worried about where the country is going with that. And who are the people who've been killed on our streets? It's the most vulnerable and people with different heritages who deserve to be looked after. And I don't think Sadiq Khan has done anything about that.
You don't think he has a grip?
No, I don't think he has. I've worked closely with all kinds of people with the police here in mid-Sussex because we said, no, we're not having no-go areas because it will happen. You have county lines, all kinds of things are going on in our country. And local councils, local authorities, they should all be working together. And I don't know, if you give it to just one police and crime commissioner or one mayor, it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah, well, actually, Anne, that's a really, really interesting point. We are going to talk about policing and how police have acted in another part of the United Kingdom now, actually, in Northern Ireland. And listen, this was a now infamous incident that occurred when an autistic teen was, according to her sister, let down by police. This is the family of a teenager with severe autism. Said that this 19-year-old woman has been left traumatised after being removed from a shop by police officers. What appears to have happened is that Katie Mitchell, who is 19, she is non-verbal, she has severe autism. She was attempting to buy a DVD in a shop for £2 for Thomas the Tank Engine. She's someone who has a limited intellectual capacity, and she'd spotted this Thomas the Tank Engine DVD. She'd wanted to buy it, but the store had just closed its tills. And Eileen Mitchell, her mother, said she couldn't understand what was going on, and we pleaded with them if she could pay the £2. Sorry, the sister said this, if she could pay the £2. My mother even offered to come back the next day with the DVD to see if they could take a photo of the DVD so they'd have the barcode. Her mother tried to explain that the young woman, Katie, has a learning difficulty, but staff became quite abusive with my parents. They started swearing at my sister. She alleges this. Her sister was starting to cry. My sister was told to get out of the shop, and then the police were called, and the Police Service of Northern Ireland were called, and she was removed from the shop in pretty traumatic circumstances. Let's just play this short clip now of what happened when Katie Mitchell was removed from the shop in Belfast.
Cops taking a child out of a video shop over a £2 tip.
So we see at least 3 officers in vision there attempting, taking this woman out, sort of manhandling, holding her limbs anyway, and taking her out of the shop. She's clearly very distressed, by this, and there are questions about what the shop did, there are questions about what the police did, and we'll talk about that in a second with a former senior officer. But I just want to read a little statement, first of all, from MenCap, which is a charity in Northern Ireland which helps many people who have many problems, and problems certainly in regard to autism is one area in which they work. They say instead of receiving the compassionate support and understanding that she deserved, the situation was manhandled, further exacerbating her distress. The incident is not just about a misunderstanding, it is a clear indication of a broader issue with our society's handling of vulnerable individuals. The response by both the shop staff and the police, the charity argues, was not only inadequate, but was also deeply troubling. It underscores a significant gap in the training and sensitivities required when engaging with individuals who have learning disabilities and autism. We call on the police service and retail industries to implement comprehensive training programmes that equip their staff with the skills and understanding necessary to support and respect individuals with disabilities. It's imperative all service personnel are trained to recognise and adapt their approach to accommodate the needs of those with learning disabilities and autism. Moreover, we urge an immediate review and revision of procedures when police are called to assist with individuals with disabilities, ensuring that their approach prioritises empathy, patience and de-escalation techniques tailored to the person's needs. Well, let's talk about this with the former temporary superintendent within the police service of Northern Ireland, John Burrows, who's joined this programme before. He's a former head of the police service of Northern Ireland's discipline branch. John, we've only seen a small portion, of course, of what happened there. This was a much longer incident, and we've only seen about sort of 15 seconds of it. And I don't want to say that that's an entire representation of what happened, but it is part of what happened, John. Did the right thing happen? Was this handled well?
Well, I think it's a very difficult and distressing situation for everyone involved, including, of course, the police officers and principally the young lady and her family. But in many of these cases, Peter, the police are dealing with mental health issues, vulnerability, educational needs, and they've become nearly the first and last resort in dealing with them increasingly in society. And a situation like that has no perfect outcome. And sometimes it looks very messy, and sometimes it looks very traumatic. But in this case, the police spent 20
it was
minutes.
traumatic. It was clearly it doesn't just look at it. It was traumatic for the family and for the young woman involved who presumably was really baffled as to, firstly, why she couldn't just buy the DVD, but secondly, how the police dealt with her.
Yeah, and look, the police were called by the family. What didn't initially become clear is that you actually see one of the people carrying out the young lady is in fact her father, and the police officers assisted the family in getting her out of the shop. The police were really in an invidious position. They spent 20 minutes in dialogue and de-escalation. None of that was going to work. The shop were saying, look, we have to close. And the police were really damned if they did and damned if they didn't. And I just want to make a point about the number of officers involved, because sometimes to have more officers, whilst it looks heavy-handed, is actually the way you can remove someone in the least injurious way. If you actually have a number of officers, you can control each limb, they can remove someone without causing injury in a way that it would be if it was one or two officers. So look, difficult situation, but a lot of the hot takes that we've seen came immediately after 15 seconds of video. And really people rush to judgment, and they don't understand that the police deal with a lot of these situations that are really social issues, health issues, mental health issues, and they can't do it perfectly. There is no perfect outcome. And it's a bit like sometimes having open heart surgery conducted by a paramedic at the side of a road. It's not going to be perfect. And when policing is dealing with really dynamic, difficult issues around mental health and vulnerability on the street, you aren't going to get the perfect outcome.
Do we expect too much of the police these days? I mean, do people expect that they can just come in? I mean, we've got MenCap here saying, this is a reasonable point to make when they say all service personnel are trained to recognise and adapt their approach to accommodate the needs of those with learning disabilities and autism. I mean, what sort of training will the officers that you worked with previously, what sort of training will they have to deal with people specifically who have learning difficulties and are experiencing, non-verbal autism, for example?
Yeah, well, it's really come on leaps and bounds since I first joined the police. So now you'll have that trained in foundation training right across the UK. There'll then be continuous training that happens every year. The police service have just signed a new partnership for further training specifically on autism. That is replicated right across the UK. And it will talk about identifying vulnerabilities. It will talk about some of the barriers you have in communication, some of the help that you can get people. So it really builds up your compassion and your empathy and your problem-solving skills. But it really is just a basic first aid course, if you like, because policing deals with such a range of things. And this is just one of them. And it is very difficult to get a perfect outcome.
What would you have done in this situation, John? You have this situation where there's a young woman who it's very hard to communicate with her, no matter who you are, even her own family, who know her better than anybody, are having problems communicating with her, saying, look, we've got to go, we've got to leave. You know, you're not going to be able to get this DVD. And actually, will be people who will say, hold on a second, this is a 19-year-old who's clearly had major problems. There's a £2 DVD. Just give her the DVD, for goodness sake. Just end this and stop the huge escalation of the situation. So if your officers, when you were in the police service, had been called to this, or you yourself had gone there, what would you do? How would you approach it?
Well, the first thing I would do is they spend 20 minutes trying to de-escalate it. The first thing I would do is, and we can't tell the shop what to do, but, you know, it may have been one way of de-escalating. If I was the shopkeeper, let me ask it this way. If I was the shopkeeper, I probably would have said, there's the DVD, give us £2 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay? But I'm not the shopkeeper, and we can't judge the shopkeeper without them having a right to reply.
Yeah.
Once the shop were not prepared to do that, and the family could not get this young lady to leave, I'm unsure of what more the police can do, because what we cannot have in society is police to simply shrug their shoulders and walk away and say, well, this is actually going to be too unpopular.
Yeah.
And that's my concern with all of the vitriol that comes to policing now when there's social media.
And there have been quite a number of people right across, not just in Northern Ireland, but right across the United Kingdom, who have put, as you say, their hot take, their tuppence worth in this without perhaps knowing the whole facts, which is why in this interview I'm trying to get more facts around this and more different, more and different opinions in regard to that. And there are people who are very unhelpful in simply saying that this is, to the naked eye, certainly this is pretty disgraceful and looks very, very bad. But perhaps the police officers were actually just doing the job. Is that your contention, John?
Yeah, look, you can't pick your family. An old saying, police officers can't pick their duty. And, you know, what you can't have in society is police officers, you shrug their shoulders, walk away and say, well, actually, it's too difficult. This isn't going to look good on TV. This isn't going to look good whenever there's a 10-second clip exposed. And had the police simply walked away, if all of the de-escalation attempts had failed, and the attempts for the family to get this young lady to leave of her own accord have failed, the police are then left with a situation. We either walk away and abandon the situation, in which case you may have really a volatile situation where someone's going to get injured, or we're going to assist that family in trying to remove, as uncomfortable as that looks, this lady from this shop without causing her injury. And actually that's what they achieved. And it was the least worst outcome in my view. And the police were really in a difficult and invidious position. But that's the nature of policing.
John, I think it is a really, really interesting debate here, and certainly the Police Service of Northern Ireland, to have their view, Superintendent Kelly Moore said the police were aware of video footage circulating in social media in which officers are seen to be carrying a female from a shop. Police were called by the female's mother to provide assistance in the Bow Street area of Lisburn at 6:15 on Sunday. The shop was closing its shutters when a female entered the premises. It is a show called shop called CEX. It's a kind of almost what used to be called a pawn shop, essentially. Officers attended, and after discussions with family and staff members for approximately 20 minutes, a 19-year-old female with complex needs was removed from the shop by a family member. John, thanks very much indeed for your thoughts on that. Happy New Year to you. Appreciate that. And thank you to Stephen Millings in Belfast, who says, just name the shop CEX. I just have there, Stephen. Yeah, no problem. What they did was absolutely disgusting. I was in retail for a lifetime. I can't imagine this happening in any shop I ran, says Stephen Millings in Belfast. And Lester is in Stratford-upon-Avon and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 about this. Lester, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter. Good evening to you. I just thought actually that I'd say that as a person that spent many years in Northern Ireland, I'm surprised, in fact, the shop didn't actually turn around and say to them, to the young girl, in fact, or the parent, look, you can have that. It's £2. Have it with our compliments.
Yeah, happy Christmas.
I mean, I know the people in Northern Ireland many years ago very well, and they're very generous people. And for someone to do that, I don't know where the shop was located. Do you know, Peter?
It's in Lisburn.
Lisburn. Yeah, I know Lisburn. But yeah, but no, that was all. I just find it incredible that somebody actually...
It does seem to be quite strange. Now, one thing we don't have is the shop's side of the story in any of this. I haven't seen that in any of the reporting or statements that have been out in regard to this. But and we want to be... I personally just want to be careful in terms of saying, well, maybe they have a different side to it. But it does seem common sense would dictate your view, which is my view as well, Lester, where you just say, it's £2, we've got the police here, give her the DVD, let's just completely de-escalate this, Merry Christmas, off you go.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I just think that it's what they call common sense.
Yeah.
However, sometimes in this day and age, those things go out of the window. Anyway, it's a fantastic station. I listen to it from the morning right to the day when I can. Keep up the great work, and I wish you a very fantastic and a healthy and a prosperous new year.
Thank you, and absolutely the same to you, Lester, as well. What a lovely message and some common sense spoken there, so thank you. Alice in Belfast has been in touch and said, why did the police not just say to the shop staff to let the young girl have the DVD and then no stress, no problem, you don't need Einstein to work that out. Glad you and Mike are back, says Alice. Well, thank you, Alice. Well, it's interesting talking to John Burrows there, former senior police officer in Northern Ireland. You can't tell the shop how to act. You can't say you've got to do this. Like, common sense would dictate that that's what you would do. But as I say, we haven't heard from the shop in this. But listen, thank you for your thoughts on that, and to Stephen Millings and to Lester and others who have been in touch about this as well. Also, Anne has been in touch to say, your Conservative guest last comment on your programme made me laugh. Is it really too late for them, with or without Kemi Badenoch? I believe the Conservatives are now a spent force, and I will not vote for anything that resembles the last 14 years of Conservative government, says Anne. And another person saying, who actually decides who should get an honour? Well, it's sort of a bit of a complex process. I actually nominated someone for an honour once. Didn't work. They didn't get it. They should have, but they didn't. And what happens is you put together a proposal. You do different letters from different people who you think, giving examples of what that person has done. You send it to the nominations committee. It's run by the Cabinet Office, which is the sort of central bit of government, and they have an appointments committee, and the committee look through thousands of different suggestions every year. And in fact, more often than once a year. In fact, they come out King's birthday, New Year's honours, different times, and they look through them and decide who should get them, and they decide. So there is a committee, civil servants and various people. You can look it up. If you just look up Honours Committee online, just do a bit of a Google, you'll see who's on it. Some of them, of course, have honours themselves. We can debate that as well. But listen, thanks for that message, and yeah, that is how it works, and I did nominate someone for an honour. They should have got it, but they didn't. But anyway, it is one of those processes that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. Anyway, we're going to talk in just a second about the Royals. They're people who don't need honours, any more honours than they already have. Rupert Bell will be with us on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, 2024 had many, many challenges for the royal family. Cancer in regard to the King and indeed the Princess of Wales. So what's 2025 going to look like for them? We have those numbers as well totted up. Sophie Wessex, the Duchess of Edinburgh, she has had lots of foreign trips and has done loads and loads of different engagements. But of course, we know that the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, as always, tops the list of the royals who has carried out the most engagements. Well, Rupert Bell is Talk's royal correspondent and can take us through all of this now. Rupert, where do you think things stand for the royal family now as the final day of 2024, looking into 2025?
Well, I think it's a period of sort of regrouping and hopefully going forward with positive news on all fronts, because obviously 2024, it was a couple of weeks into this year that obviously things had a seismic change with the hospitalisation of both the King and the Princess of Wales. And that meant, everything was sort of turned on its head. For the Prince of Wales, obviously he had the issue of dealing not only with his father getting diagnosed, but more significantly, his wife as well. So it meant that he had to curtail his arrangements as well, because obviously his priority was to look after his wife and children, as anyone would, whoever you are. In whatever circumstances. So they will be hoping that this Christmas break sort of heralds a new dawn in what has been a very difficult year for them, and gives them the opportunity to get back out on the road. There has been talk that the Princess of Wales wants to get back foreign travel again, doing some official visits overseas. So those are all good signs, but obviously we just hope that the medical advice that they're getting is all very encouraging and that enables them to do that.
What is happening in 2025 that is a bit different? Are there anniversaries? Are there things that the royals will be taking part in beyond the routine of things that they do every year, Rupert? Are the things that are coming up that we think are particularly interesting for the royals and where we'll see them perhaps out and about even more than we would have before?
I don't think there's anything obvious. I think they just want to be out and about.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be the obviously from the end of the Second World War, 1945, so there may be some celebrations around that, but apart from anything else, I can't think off the top of my head if there's any, but they are planning visits and state visits to this country, so I don't think we're in for anything that is suddenly we're going to be focusing on something enormous. There's no sort of royal weddings or anything like that in the corner. So I suppose it's just a period of regrouping. And I think that's the important thing now. They've got to get back out there and engage again with the British public, particularly the ones where the King has been pretty good, even under these circumstances, of making sure that he is as visible as he can be. The Princess of Wales has been different, but obviously over the last couple of months, we have seen a little bit more of it, obviously with that Christmas carol concert in Westminster Abbey, and obviously the semi-official, quasi-public, private walk to the church, which is almost like a sort of official function now, because it is staged, managed within an inch of its life. You just look at the order that they walk in there. It's not just, oh, I'm off to church now, I'll see you there. No, it is very staged, managed, that particular walk to the church. Obviously, there are lots of people there, but then looking forward, we hopefully will see them back out and about again in January and forever onwards.
Tell us about the two most problematic royals, Prince Andrew and indeed Prince Harry. How are relations with them likely to change, if at all, in 2025?
I'm not expecting, again, a huge shift. For Harry and Meghan, I think they just have got to somehow kick on and find a way of making their current move to America come off, because obviously we saw that Polar documentary, which I don't think moved the Netflix dial much. Obviously there's still talk of a cooking show, the launch of American Riviera Orchard for Meghan, so they'll be hoping that and Invictus Games I think will be an important moment for Harry, because we know that's something he's passionate about. That comes up in February in Canada, so that'll be a chance for him to reconnect and make it about him, because some of recent Invictus Games, he's found himself, it's not all about him, where he's the one who should be connecting with the servicemen and women there and making and showing his passion. And I do know that when he goes there and he's sort of left to his own devices, he's the Harry of old. So hopefully he will get a chance to engage with everybody and once again show what a part he's got to play in being a figurehead around something as significant as the Invictus Games.
Rupert, thank you. That's Rupert Bell, Talks Royal correspondent. Appreciate his contribution this evening. Mark is in Lincolnshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, I get the sense, like basically everybody else who's contacting us today, not too happy about Sir Sadiq Khan.
Indeed, Peter, I'm not. Hello, by the way.
Hi there.
Hi there. Yeah, it's just, for me, it's not so much that he's getting it because, you know, at the end of the day, they're always giving each other these awards because it's just what they do in politics. For me, it's always the thing with Labour, just the hypocrisy of these people. Because on the one hand, they're always, you know, Sadiq Khan, for example, he's, you know, somebody that's big on things like CRT and decolonisation and all this kind of stuff. And
yet he's happy to be a Knight of the Realm.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I mean. And it's just like, you know, when Tory people are getting it, they'll have a go at it. Oh, this is an arcane system. It needs replacing. We need to have people in there and we need to do this and elected that and all the rest of it. But when it's heading their way, all of a sudden they absolutely love British history and traditions. Oh, it's fantastic. And I can absolutely guarantee you, come next year, he'll be just back to his old self. As I say, everything about Britain, Christianity, all the rest of it, that can all go out the window. You know, it's all terrible. We need immigrants left, right and centre and all the rest of it. Because that's what these people are like. And as I say, it's just the hypocrisy for me. It's just ridiculous. It's quite pathetic, really.
I think it's interesting as well because we've had sort of three phases of this, aren't there, Mark? We've had all the Lords going in, quite a few Labour Lords. They would say that redresses the balance in the Lords, but they're trying to get rid of the hereditary peers as well, saying that it's nonsensical to have people who are simply born into the role. Well, you know, people appointed into the role not democratically and actually are having a say in our legislation. You could argue that it's two sides of the same coin, really.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you know, you can't have it both ways, can you, at the end of the day? When they're deciding who's going in there, as the Prime Minister gets to nominate these people, well, I say nominate, he actually awards them. The King has very little to do with this, but he's for a different day. So, yeah, it's just, as I say, Peter...
Yeah. What do you think about some of the people who actually have been on this list? I mean, there are some who I think deserve them, and I wonder what you think, Mark, as well, because in a minute we're actually going to talk to former sub-postmaster Chris Head. He and three others have made it onto the New Year's honours list, and I have no problem with that necessarily, but I do think people being given honours more generally just for doing their job is something that I can't really get behind.
Yeah, I mean, the same, to be honest with you. People... You know, like the post office guys, I don't have any issue with that. I don't have any issue with people like, you know, the fireman that's gone above and beyond his job in whatever way, or, you know, the doctor or whoever it is. Yes, they're doing their job, but sometimes people do go above and beyond. And that should be recognised. And that's really, for me, what it should be about. It should be about, you know, service personnel that have gone above and beyond, that have risked their own life to save some people, you know, save some of their colleagues. That kind of thing, where they didn't necessarily have to or were advised or told not to, and they've gone against that, but and they've managed to rescue somebody and everybody's got out alive, etc.
I know what you mean.
I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with, and will always have a problem with the Lords, is obviously the hereditary thing. That's just ridiculous. But I also have a major issue when you have, like, the situation, as you were saying there, Labour have appointed a load of Lords now, basically just to complete, although of course it
should be said the Conservatives do it as well. All political parties do it, and that's the way. Well, that's the way it works.
But they absolutely shouldn't, should they?
Yeah.
They should just let it. Realistically, I mean, this should really just be something down to the King. Really, as far as I'm concerned, the politicians shouldn't really have anything to do with it. But then again,
Then again, he's hereditary as well. I mean, that's a debate. Let's have that debate on another day. I've got to go to a break, Mark. But you speak, as always, some common sense and a very happy new year to you. We're going to talk to the former sub-postmaster Chris Head in just a second. As I said, he and 3 others have made it on to the New Year's honours list from that Horizon scandal. We'll also hear from James Max, who is going to be here between 7 and 10. And then Petri Hoskin actually is going to be here between 10 and 1, ringing in the new year at midnight here on Talk. So stay with us for all of that. But Chris Head next here on Talk.
I think there is a conversation to be had around the impact of social media because, you know, we see it everywhere, don't we? It's just insidious. It's people on the trains playing music out loud because they think no one else can hear it. It's this idea that they're all walking around in a bubble, people walking down the street staring at a screen and unable to have a conversation or a debate or meet a stranger or, you know, and it's affecting people in the workplace. And as an economy, we do need people to be healthy, happy and well and working.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Kevin in Basingstoke has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Kevin, I think you are happy enough about Sir Sadiq Khan.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know why people have got a problem with it. I mean, he's been a record-breaking 3 times elected London mayor. He increased his vote every single time. So why shouldn't he be honoured? I mean, I've got more problem with Boris Johnson nominating somebody, a Russian that was a security risk by MI5, the Bone woman that made hundreds of millions out of PPE contracts. I think he even put his hairdresser.
Yes, his hairdresser did get an MBE, although, you know, that is a difficult job. And maybe a gong is appropriate in the circumstances. Kevin, I think I'm no fan of Sadiq Khan, but I think you've got a point in that the Conservatives do this. We've had of course, you know, Sir Gavin Williamson, for example, who was a pretty bad education secretary, many people would think, and this kind of just happens in politics. I wonder from your perspective whether you think it devalues the system, or does the system of gongs and OBEs and all the rest of it have value to you? What do you think, Kevin?
No, that hasn't. I mean, if it's got anything to do with the royal family, I think... I mean, I'm against the royal family. I think we should be a republic. I mean, and I think the royal family are quite happy to have Harry, Meghan, and Andrew as the villains, so that they can be the heroes, especially after the Panorama programme, where they was making money from the military, the NHS, charities.
Yeah, those are the Crown estates that you're talking about there as well. Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I think, look, I don't agree with you, but I think you make some pretty good points there. I just wonder who you think does deserve an honour.
Well, I mean, I'm okay. It's okay if people are honoured, but not from the royal family. I mean,
okay.
It's okay honouring people, but not when it's got connection to them, because it just sort of, we've got a pyramid sort of society, haven't we, with the royal family at the top and all their sort of entourage going downwards and to the people at the bottom.
Yeah, I think there are problems in that regard in many other ways as well. I think that system that you suggest is something we need to keep questioning, and indeed we will here at Talk. Kevin, really enjoyed your call, thank you. And on my programmes we disagree without being disagreeable, and that's what I've just done with Kevin, and thank you to him, and a very happy New Year to him as well. Speaking of people I think do deserve honours, we're going to talk now to Chris Head. Chris Head OBE. Chris, congratulations on receiving your OBE, but my goodness, you've been through the mill to get to this point. I know you were falsely accused of stealing more than £80,000 from a post office branch in West Bolden in 2006 before the criminal case against you was dropped. Is this some form of vindication, some form of amelioration, making things better, or actually... I mean, how do you feel today now that you've got the OBE, and very, very many congratulations for getting it?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the congratulations. It's a difficult moment, you know. Obviously, the fight has been going on for 20 years for some people, and you know, myself for the last 10 years. And you know, it's a very proud moment to receive, you know, an honour like that in recognition of the campaign work and all the things that have gone on to get to where we are today. I think the difficult part is that if we were receiving this at the end of the process, where we know that, you know, everybody had received their full financial redress, those responsible are being held to account, and this was like the closure part of it, I think that would be, you could celebrate it a lot more. Unfortunately, you know, as you probably well know, that the redress processes are a mess. A lot of people are not getting the full and fair, you know, compensation that they're being promised. And we know it's many, many years until those responsible hopefully will be held to account. So there's going to be a lot of fights still to go on in 2025 where we've left off in 2024.
Do you, I mean, not to be, I don't want to take anything away from your achievement. I don't want to be cynical or horrible about this in any way. I mean, massive congratulations for doing so. I just wonder, maybe this is a question worth asking, and I hope you don't see this as an unkind thing, but I wonder if some people will say, they're giving them those gongs now, so that perhaps they will take the foot off the gas a little bit and maybe not just be as strong in their advocacy. I'm sure that's not going to happen with you, but there may well be some people who have that sort of cynical approach to the fact that this has happened.
Look, I can definitely understand that, you know, and I tried to put that, you know, when I first received the letter, you know, which obviously was a huge surprise. You know, I tried to put it through my own mind, you know, what is this, you know, what is the reason behind it? You know, trying to understand that. You know, am I going to take this, and do I see some kind of benefit from it? And the way that I looked at it was that, regardless of what them processes were, was this going to give us a stronger voice in order to keep the campaign going? And that's what I looked at. And I thought, well, you know, we can utilise this. We had the drama that obviously spearheaded into the homes of millions and millions of people, but obviously this would be another way for us to have a much stronger, louder voice, people to listen, and obviously for us to continue to hold the post office and government to account. So I looked at it like that and thought, you know, this could be a benefit to help.
Did you ever seriously consider not taking it, Chris?
It crossed my mind a few times. I just, you know, I was trying to understand what the reason behind that was, but I said, you know, is this the greater good? You know, you're trying to balance things out all the time. A bit like when we did the exoneration of all them people, and we had to withdraw some of the amendments that obviously excluded some people because of the election coming up. You know, you had to make the difficult choices, and I think, you know, this was a point where I know it's a huge honour, like I said, to receive it, and I honestly, hopefully, can see it being a benefit in order to drive this to a resolution.
Lee Castleton, Seema Misra and Joe Hamilton have also been honoured for services to justice. I know they're friends of yours and fellow comrades in all of this. I mean, how has this been for you over the years, Chris, to be so badly treated by the system?
It's very, very difficult because, I mean, obviously you remember that the Post Office was once the most trusted brand, wasn't it? And obviously, owned by the government. And obviously you expect, when you're working for an organisation like that at least that they're going to treat you, properly and fairly. And actually when it comes out of it, and actually they're actually the ones inflicting the harm. And that's been perpetuated over many, many years by the denial, the obfuscation, the cover-up and all of that. And utilising hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayer money to try and defeat us in court because they didn't want it to come out. And that's what it's been. And I think, to be vindicated, first of all, when the court case was successful in 2019, that was the first part where we could say, to show everybody that actually we were right, what we were saying is right, and we exposed it. But here we are, nearly 6 years later, and hundreds, if not thousands of people are still waiting for that redress. So, it shows that obviously the justice, the wheels of justice turn very, very slowly in this country, and we have to keep campaigning to try and stop. We see scandal after scandal, don't we? Whether it's infected blood, whether it's post office, whether it's Windrush, and all these things. And I'm hoping that maybe the post office one has galvanised the outrage of the public. And I hope that maybe can make a difference.
You've inspired a heck of a lot of people, Chris, and many, many congratulations on your OBA. I hope you have a wonderful time at the Palace when you're actually awarded it. Really, really appreciate you joining us this evening. And that was Chris Head there. He's one of 4 postmasters who have been honoured today in the New Year honours alongside Lee Castleton, Seema Misra and Joe Hamilton. They're honoured for services to justice. Well, thank you to Chris for joining us. James Max is here on the other side of the news between 7 and 10. James, what's coming up in your programme?
I am indeed, and a very good evening to you.
Good evening.
All sorts as we head towards New Year's. So after 9, we're going to be crossing to Australia to find out exactly what's been going on there. We'll be looking ahead. We've got a psychic joining the show. Yeah,
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Hey. Then about 8:30, it's gin o'clock. Alex Robson, she's coming in because how could I possibly do a show without alcohol? So we'll be looking at that. Also going to be joined live in the studio by Russ Kane and also by Jenny Jones, Baroness Jenny Jones, no less, of the Green Party. We'll be going through the big stories of the year. We'll also be joined by Michael Trabulsi, former newsreader. Now he runs a production company, so we're going to be talking to him about those big news stories and political stories as well. And also we're going to be asking the question, why are you happy or sad to say goodbye to 2024? So we'll be looking at all of those stories, plus more.
What's been the highlight for you of 2024, James? Apart from this conversation, obviously.
Apart from this conversation. I'm not sure. I think 2024 has been a fairly rubbish year.
Has it?
Yeah. Personally, difficult when you lose a parent, so that's never ideal. And a lot of things to adjust to and difficulties on the way into that. I think politically, I've never been more despondent about our politics. I've never been more disappointed about the direction of the country. And the opportunities that we have and the next generations have. I think a lot of stuff that is produced by our broadcasters, we're losing our edge